have given a name to my pain. The Batman.
Always waiting for some Batman to save you.
It's simple. We kill the Bat of Gotham.
You don't really think you'll win, do you? I'm Batman.
Hello and welcome to episode 117 of the Batman on Film podcast. BOF is the sponsor as well as a proud member of the Batman Podcast Network. Check out all the shows over at batmanpodcastnetwork.com and follow our brand new Twitter account at BatPodNetwork. If you're listening to us on iTunes, if you take the time to rate and review the show, we'll read it on the air. Batman on Film is now on Patreon as well. If you like what we do here at BOF, whether it's the podcasts, vlogs, or the website itself, and you want to help support us if you're so inclined, head over to patreon.com/BatmanOnFilm for all the details. I am the host of today's podcast, Ryan Haas. If you listen to our previous episode, that was a commentary discussion for Batman Ninja. I announced a contest that you can enter to win a download code for that movie. And that contest is still ongoing. If you still have a chance to listen to it, you still have a chance to win. As a reminder, all you have to do to enter that contest is to submit an iTunes review for the BOF podcast by Saturday, May 26th, which is in a few days, and we will announce the winner shortly thereafter on the Batman Podcast Twitter handle at BatPodNetwork. Okay. With all that housekeeping out of the way, we can finally get on with the show. And all week I have been chomping at the bit to do this particular episode because I have a feeling it's going to be really special. And thank goodness I don't have to do this one alone. And we have a panel full of very passionate experts on our topic tonight. First up, we have BOF's very own Peter Verra. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, Ryan. How are you? It's a pleasure to be here with the Drakes.
Oh, the Drakes! You spoiler. So, yes, as you heard, we have my pal and reoccurring panelist at this point, Rob Myers. How are you doing, Rob?
Hey, doing really good. It's nice to sit in the Bat chair without Batman sitting in it. Don't tell Bill.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm the fill-in Batman, so what does that make me? Like a Dick Grayson?
Dick Grayson.
Azrael? Or
Yeah, you're cool with it.
One
You're
of those,
Asbats.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sitting my Asbats on the bat chair for tonight. And finally, I am so glad we have this guy on with us because I'm sure he will round out the discussion very nicely. And for some strange reason, it is actually his very first appearance on the BOF podcast. It is the other third, better third of the Robin Everyone Loves the Drake podcast, Mr. Terence O'Neill. How are you doing, Terence?
Hey, great. Thanks. I've been a fan of Batman on Film since the Batman Begin days. I used to work this desk job where I did nothing but fool around on the internet for like 7 hours and then work frantically for an hour at the end of the day to try to make it look like I did something. And so when they were filming this Batman Begins, I was, scouring the internet trying to find stuff about it and been a big fan of Batman on Film ever since. But when you said you're Asbats, I feel like halfway through this podcast, the system is going to kick in and the evil Ryan Asbats is going to take over. Yeah.
Yeah, it might. I mean, this year, just talking about BOF in general, this year is BOF's 20th anniversary, and it's that actual date is coming up pretty quick. So, you coming in on the Batman Begins days, that's pretty good. I visited the site when it was still Jet D60's Batman 5 page.
Oh,
so
wow.
Coming home from school off the bus. I would come home from school off the bus, 6th grade. The first thing I would do was hop on the computer, go to Jet D60's Batman 5 page and see if there was any new rumors or whatever. And, man, here we are 20 years later, still talking about Batman and being part of the site. So it's pretty awesome. So, today's topic, as mutual listeners may know, the Robin Everyone Loves the Drake podcast is in the midst of a pretty incredible and quite insane event where Rob has somehow managed to get mostly everyone from every Batman podcast ever to lend their voice talent to a very expertly done audio drama of the Detective Comics arc, A Lonely Place of Living, where Tim Drake comes back to the realm of the living from his supposed death. And that arc is, it's a lot of people's favorites, but it's definitely one of my favorites in that series and in DC Comics Rebirth in general. And a couple months ago, I got to thinking that since James Tynion's run on the book is coming to a close with issue 981, and with any luck, this episode you're listening to should be out the day that issue was released, I hope. But Detective Comics is my favorite book of DC Rebirth. And although it's sad that it's over between issues 934 and 981, there's like 48 or so odd issues of comics there that make up one gigantic, epic Batman story. So I asked these guys a couple months ago, when this whole thing is over, do you want to do a huge deep dive podcast on the entire run? And they were super on board for it. So it should go without saying that we're going to spoil the heck out of this whole thing. So I imagine that most listeners would fall into either two categories. You've either read everything or you read nothing. And
I hope
if
you read
everything. Yeah. I hope all four of us have, or this will not be a very interesting podcast. But if you have read none of it, if you're a listener, if you have read none of this, stick around anyway. You might enjoy it. You'll get a crash course on this whole series, and it might encourage you to pick up some of the traits because it's got an interesting concept behind it, and I'm hoping that we can do it justice just by discussing the whole thing. So just to dive into this, the first thing I want to ask everyone is, when DC Rebirth and this book specifically was announced, what did you think about it, and what were your expectations, and were you excited about Detective Comics? And I think I'd like to start with Peter.
I really didn't know too much about Tynion when this was announced. Like, this is really my kind of introduction to him as a writer. So I was kind of on board. Coming out of like New 52 and into Rebirth, I was excited. Just kind of the whole idea of Rebirth, especially at like Convergence, of kind of blending everything back into what was, different DCUs into kind of what we're more familiar with traditionally. So, and going back to the traditional numbering system of Detective, was really what kind of caught my eye. I thought the team was a little too big, like the characters. It seemed like a very big story, but a lot of them have their payoffs, so it's not really a bad thing. It seems like throughout this run, a lot of guys get their due. A lot of side characters traditionally who don't get their due in this run, and that's really what I took out of it. And so that was a positive. That was my one like weary thing, but it ended up being a very big positive. So I was excited. I like reading Detective. Detective is it's Detective Comics. It's the book that debuted the Batman, so I'm never not going to read it. But, I think it's above and beyond what we got from the New 52 Detective. Well, I don't think that's horrible. I don't think it's the best version of Detective Comics that we've read recently. I feel like Snyder's Batman was the Batman title that everyone really talked about from there. So I feel like this Detective really stands up with Tom King's Batman title. So I think they did a great thing here.
Cool. What about you, Terence?
Yeah, well, it's funny because Rob sent me a text saying that on episode 38 of the Drake, we talked about this book coming out and what it would be. And now I didn't get a chance to re-listen to that. So now I'm afraid I'm going to say like the exact opposite. And people are like, you liar. That's not what you said.
I re-listened to that today, and the thing I pointed out was that it's actually pretty much exactly 2 years since that conversation happened, and I listened to it. It was you and Rob talking about this, and you were both pretty excited.
Yeah, no, so. I was excited for a number of reasons. One, because I was getting back into comics from Rebirth. I had left for about 2 years with the New 52. And seeing Tim Drake in what is pretty close to his traditional Robin suit, and then seeing Stephanie Brown in what was pretty close to her traditional spoiler outfit, kind of made me think that they were going to kind of be a actual rebirth of the cool comics of the 90s and the early 2000s. And then seeing Clayface was really interesting, of like, well, what does this mean for Clayface to be on the team? And I know a lot of people dismissed this book out of hand because they didn't like the idea of Batman Batman being a part of a team or running a team. They like that solo Batman, and Lord knows I love solo Batman, but there's plenty of solo Batman stories out there, and there's plenty to come still. Yeah. But so I would tell people who dismiss this out of hand, give it a chance, because it is really good storytelling. When I started reading comics, there was this book called Batman and the Outsiders that I found. So to me, I always just assume, oh yeah, Batman was with the team. And this book easily could have been called Batman and the Outsiders, because they are kind of C-level supporting cast to some extent. But
that's an awesome point.
But yeah, thanks. But the funny thing is, when I opened the book, when I finally first got issue 934, the very first thing I thought was, "Ooh, Ryan's gonna love this," because it starts with an Azrael action scene. So I knew, like, when we were on the Drake, I knew you would like it. Yeah,
cool. Yeah, so when it was announced, well, first of all, DC Rebirth, I couldn't have been more excited about, because it seemed like after the New 52, they had finally come up with the gigantic missing thing was just the lack of all of this history and lore and continuity, and that has been built up over the years, and what makes the characters, the legacy and history of DC Comics. And they threw all that out for the New 52 just to kind of shake things up and get new readers and stuff, but they lost a lot of the heart of DC Comics in the process. And as an overall kind of thing, it was interesting to read interviews with James Tynion before this, because he talked about that. And one of the biggest characters that got the short end of the stick in New 52 was our favorite Robin, Tim Drake, because he was relegated to Teen Titans. His costume was different. His origin was changed, and
the costume was
screwed up. And yeah, it was god awful. It was terrible. And so there was that part of it that appealed to me, but the other part was the concept of Batman forming this team. And just because I knew that we had things like Batman Eternal and Batman and Robin Eternal, things that James Tynion had been part of before, he seemed like a writer that was excited and eager to kind of play the long game. And this book was going to be his baby, and like his, the sole writer on it. Since those other two series were more weekly things, this was going to be something that, and they split up writers and stuff, but this one was going to be his book. And they moved to this twice a month shipping schedule, so you get 2 issues a month instead of 1, which for a Batman monthly, or now it's a Batman bi-monthly, so it the theory was that it would allow the stories to move at a faster pace and be able to do some interesting things. And so I thought that format in general sounded something good for a book of this nature that concerned Batman with a team. It seemed like there's a lot of moving parts and pieces, and it should. And my hope was that it would be able to give a lot of these characters the spotlight. But that's kind of how I was. I was just eager. Mostly, my end was Rebirth, and then Tim Drake, and then the concept of the book itself. And so I was very excited about it when it was first announced.
No, I was just going to piggyback off you and say, I think you're right with it being shipped twice a month. It really was, you were able to flesh out a lot of his characters, and I thought that was great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very much the same like what we've all said, being that I was somebody that I stuck through that guy's name that we won't mention that wrote Teen Titans for so long in the New 52, that was my only Tim Drake book. And people are like, oh, I can't believe that you continue to read that book. I'm like, well, my favorite character, it's the only book that he's in, and if I'm not reading it, then I kind of feel like I'm, on one hand, I felt like I was supporting this, like, hey, I like this version of the character. On the other hand, I was like, it was a sad time to read a character that you like so much that's not being represented at all the way he should be. And that's kind of where our show came from. I was like, I want to get back to talking about a Tim Drake that meant something. I can't believe nobody else understands that. And I think it was episode 38 that we were talking about, that Terence and I were talking about, when Rebirth was first announced and kind of what it all meant. And the opening paragraph that the article we read from like Doom Rocket, I think is where the article came from. It was talking about Tim Drake and, you can hear Terrence and I's reactions. Like James gets Tim Drake, and not only that, he got Stephanie Brown. It was like, oh, there's Batwoman involved in this, and then Cassandra Cain, who used to be Batgirl, and we didn't know what, is she still going to be the orphan? And the big, the big elephant in the room was like, oh, it's Clayface. So if I can quote A Lonely Place to Living, because I've done it so much, that Tim Drake has a line in there that says, people think of Batman as a solitary character, but he was only a solo for a year. And after that first year, he's always had some type of partner. So for me, if you say Batman to somebody, their next word is probably going to be and Robin or something like that, where people think, oh, Batman doesn't work in a team. I'm like, he's always been part of a team. It's usually been him and Robin or him and the Justice League. And for me, the solo Bat adventures are really cool, but it takes it to a different level when you're just reading Batman's internal monologue, where he gets to turn and talk to another character, and 2 characters or 3 characters can figure this larger problem out. So I was really excited for this, and everybody looked like how they should look, but it didn't feel like, oh, this is a 90s book. Yeah, it's 90s characters, but there was a modernness to the storytelling too that was just really refreshing. So this was my favorite book out of Rebirth. As much as I like the Tom King stuff, Detective was just hitting that sweet spot of I wanted that Batman family title, and it's
so underrated when you compare it to King's book. King's book, rightfully so, gets a lot of praise, but this book doesn't get enough praise.
Yeah. And that's exactly why we're doing this podcast, is because I think a lot of people did kind of dismiss it, or still have, especially now that it's ending. It's easy to forget that this book has stuck around for nearly 50 issues, and it played the long game, and it sets up a lot of things, it pays off a lot of things. And I think to call it it's easy to call it a team book or a Batman family book, but I honestly, after reading it, a giant chunk of it and finishing it, I think just calling it that kind of does it a disservice, because it plays around with so many characters and so many themes and so many parts of Batman lore that actually are hard to and don't get the spotlight in the main Batman books. It plays around with things that you normally don't get to see unless it's in a thing like a Gotham Central or a one-shot here or there or something like that. You can only have the story go so, or a big giant DC crossover. You can only go so far with what a Batman, like a normal Batman story would go, unless there's a concept like this. And to me, some of the best, we just did our 25th anniversary Nightfall podcast a couple episodes ago. And some of those things like Nightfall and No Man's Land, they have the storytelling themselves is really good, but part of it that I think makes it last is the setup, the world building that they're in, the way that they were able to make all these sprawling stories. It's a lot of world building that puts the characters in situations that they otherwise wouldn't get to do if it was just in a regular, for the lack of a better word, monthly title. So this book reads like a Batman universe-wide crossover event 2 times a month, but it's in its own book.
That's
agree,
kind of
100%.
perfect.
Yeah.
That is a perfect way to describe this book.
Yeah, that's kind of how it felt to me. Yeah, go ahead, launch off that.
Yeah, and you know what, like what Peter was saying too, is when I was anticipating this book, I had a big anticipation of what kind of writer is James Tynion IV. And I knew he was a protege of Scott Snyder, but what came out of this book is that he's brilliant at writing teams. He's brilliant at giving each person in the team their own voice, and even deeper, each person in the team had their own motivation for being a hero or vigilante or a member of the Bat family or whatever you want to call it. And they were unique, and he would always kind of remind you a little bit like, well, this is why Spoiler's doing it, but this is why Batwoman's doing it. And this is Clayface, and Tim Drake's got this whole other Utopia version, and Batman's his thing, where you could read a Justice League story and they save the world, but you don't really know why Flash is wearing red and running around.
That is a great comparison.
So I'm so happy that James is leaving this to go to another team book that somebody at DC recognized. Keep this guy on a team, and I'm sad to see him leave Detective, but I am looking forward to his Justice League. I don't even know what the name of his
Dark
is.
Justice League Dark, right?
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, that is a great point because, yeah, you do like compare it to a Justice League or even the Justice League Rebirth that started the Rebirth, not the current one. It's not that's relaunched, but the original one. It's compared to that book. I mean, it's night and day in terms of a team book. I mean, I hate to call it that, like I said, but in this Detective Comics run, every character is there for a reason, and that reason and the reasons why they're there ebb and flow and shift and change depending on the arc itself. I mean, it's not, like I said, when I say this feels like a Batman universe-wide crossover that continues in the same book, I'm not kidding. Like, at the end of each arc, like, this isn't just a team book where it's the Justice League every issue, or it's the same team that starts this book just goes on in the next adventure with each arc. Like, major things happen in every arc that shake up the status quo of the team and of the settings that they are in. So I think that was a very interesting concept.
That's one of my favorite parts about the book. Is it Tynion or Tynion? How do you actually pronounce it?
I looked it up. It's Tynion.
Okay. I want to make sure I was saying it right.
Yeah.
But it's just like he's not afraid to get personal. Like he got really deep down in the Clayface stuff. You know, he got really deep down with Shiva and Orphan, and he got really deep with Stephanie and her father and her reasons and everything, and even her relationship with Tim, and just he got really down and personal and into just the emotion and the character and everything. And it's like you guys said earlier, it's just he blends it all really well together in a giant team, and it's like every few issues was about one person of the team, so everyone really had a chance to shine, from Azrael to Spoiler, and it was done effortlessly as he was scattering breadcrumbs throughout every issue for what's coming next, and he kind of kept you on like this, just on the edge of your seat. And, you know, and he did a really great job with all the art. Like, it was kind of a rotating wheel of artists on the book too. Like, and they really pulled it off, from like Eddie Barrows, to, Peter Verra. And I know I'm forgetting
Alvaro
names.
Martinez.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't miss a beat with any of it. The book, the whole run is beautiful, and we got great variant covers. So everyone was on the top of their game for this. And it was fabulous just to see.
So good.
I'm 32, so to see, the books that I buy in back issues and see those characters modernized, and it's like you said, they look like they're supposed to, and it's that deep emotional bond that we discovered them originally in the 90s, and you bring it up front now, and it was just great. It just was, from the first issue to the last. I mean, it was just awesome, the whole run.
Yeah. I think there's a relevancy to all this too. How not only the history you bring to the stories from the 90s, even if a point Ryan made, even if this is something like you didn't read Detective Comics, it's a team book. Yeah, like we're trying not to say that, but you feel as if there was a Red Robin solo series and a Batwoman solo series, and this is the giant event that's going across. And
there is a Batwoman solo series.
Yeah,
she does have. She's the only other one who has her own book.
But the biggest compliment I think I can pay James is, this kind of reminds me, and we just interviewed him a little while ago, is Chuck Dixon, that we're talking about. He's playing a long game and putting seeds in of things that, 6 or 7 issues down the line, you're like, oh, holy crap, I had totally forgotten about that nugget, where some writers are just writing for, okay, this is our little story arc, and this little story arc's connected, and that's it, we go on to the next thing. That you could tell that he had stories planned, and I think as we talk through this, we'll probably start seeing, I think he was looking towards issue 1000. Like, there was things he was wanting to pay off. And I think that kind of gets sped up just a little bit because his run was ending, but it flows so well. This was like the episodic television show that you're just going to binge on Netflix because it's going so well.
Yeah. So I think we've set this up really well. Before we get into the individual arcs, I wanted to take just a little bit of time and try our best to kind of, like I said, we've set the concept up for the book a little bit in terms of the team that they have and everything, but kind of wanted to set up what it is and where each character is kind of at when this whole thing starts. So I guess we can kind of go through each character. I mean, the whole concept of the book is that Batman sees a threat coming and wants to get Tim Drake involved in creating some sort of team, a team that can, scour Gotham to prepare. It's Batman's own kind of army that's created in a different sense than just, Batman has agents that just do their own things. Like you have your Batman, your Nightwing, your Batgirl. It's a team that's put together for a specific purpose. And Batman, to me, in this book, is kind of the glue that holds everybody together. He, I guess, would have the least poignant arc in the book, but that doesn't mean there isn't one or it's not important. Everything feeds into Batman and out of Batman, if that makes sense.
He is kind of in the shadows mostly throughout the book, but I feel like he's organizing, strategically planning, putting his pieces in order, throughout all the run. Yeah. He definitely,
his influence, causes and is related to a lot of things that happen.
And a lot of people did not like that. That's one thing I read on Twitter a lot that people didn't like about the book, was that Batman wasn't necessarily in the forefront. But I think if you're going to do a book this style with these characters that need time and stories and issues, I don't have really a problem with it, because he's the one who brought all this together.
Oh, I agree totally. And that's one of those things too. I'm like, you have the Batman solo book that is going on that is all about Batman. And it was kind of nice that, Batman's name appears on the title, but I think he's probably somewhere in the middle of his own book as of importance. But like Ryan said, he's that glue where everything is just funneling back and forth and through, and the decisions that he is making or has made is what's affecting everybody else around, and why all of these characters are acting the way that they're acting, or their emotions back and forth. So looking at it that way, Batman is very much front and center in this book. But as far as his dialogue goes, it's probably in the middle of the pack. But the words that the other characters are saying to and about Batman really make Batman stand out.
I feel that's appropriate for Batman within a team book. I don't really want him out in the forefront as much as I kind of do watching him just kind of like waiting in the shadows, personally.
And there's this cool thing in the beginning, right, in the first book, 934, where you think Batman knows more than he's telling you, or and even Batwoman calls him out on it and says, like, you're not telling me something, but I'll play along. So it creates this air of mystery around Batman of like, what does he know that he's not telling them? And that's like you guys said, planting the seeds, and all that stuff gets paid off further down in the story. But it's pretty awesome to be the reader and finish the issue and be like, no, I can't wait for the next issue. I can't wait for the next one. I got to find out.
Yeah. Yeah. And so moving on from Batman, Red Robin, like we said earlier, that was a huge in for me for this series, because it was the real, quote, Tim Drake finally back to his roots. He had more of a Tim Drake Robin looking costume again. And not only that, he's part of the focus of why the team is being put together. A lot of the earlier Tim Drake books had a focus on Tim Drake of being, if Batman's the world's greatest detective, Tim Drake will be the world's greatest detective eventually. He's supposed to be the smartest guy in the room. And between all the different Robins, that's kind of what differentiates him.
The heir apparent.
And some of that got lost, I think, when Damian came on the scene. But this book really tried, I thought, to give Tim Drake a purpose and a reason for being Robin, or Red Robin rather. And did that stand out to you guys when you found out that why he was there and what his purpose was?
I was just coming out of New 52. I wanted like a palate cleanser. I wanted to forget New 52, Red Robin, Tim Drake, whatever. And I just wanted to move on from it. So just aesthetically, just looking at him, I was into it, and just learning what, how he's the Belfry, and he's got this just great technical plan, and he's planning all this stuff out, and Batman's recruiting him and others. Like, it seems more traditional. And the fact that Batman with a traditional looking Robin, like that just draws me in instantly. So that's my main thing, was just, it looked like Tim Drake, and like you said, and it felt like Batman and Robin.
To me, I think the biggest thing with seeing him in there, and I've again read stuff on Twitter and even running our own podcast, people going, "Oh, I like the New 52 costume," and I'm like, "Yeah, I grew to like tolerate it at some time," but Peter just said it really well. You looked at it and you instantly knew that is Tim Drake, and seeing a Batman book with a Robin by his side, and it doesn't have to be Damian, that it's Tim, and this was kind of resetting the wrongs. And the biggest thing about Rebirth was, if you remember the Rebirth Green Lantern, the Rebirth Flash, it was about changing and bringing all those things back in. This was a rebirth for the Tim Drake character, and fixing and changing those things from the New 52 that just went completely sideways, and James going, this is who Tim Drake is. This, I feel, of every character in Rebirth, Tim Drake got the biggest reborn, like he was born again in this series, to where it was like, it was the palate cleanser. Like, this is the thing that you know and love, and this is why this character deserves to be in the spotlight and belongs on this team.
I'm just so happy they got rid of that stupid feather cape.
The funny thing was, I've got the Volume 1 Deluxe Edition trade. The original cover for 34 is Tim Drake in the winged cape. And then that was...
Oh, that's amazing.
That was changed. So if you have the deluxe version, the inner sketch cover from Eddie Barrows shows Orphan without her mask and Red Robin in the New 52 Red Robin costume.
That's tremendous.
Wow. Yeah, so moving on from Red Robin, I think the next logical character to bring up is Spoiler. I don't know when Spoiler had been brought up in the new... Was she in the New 52 at all? Or
I
was
don't
she
remember
in
her.
one of the Eternals?
She was in both Eternals.
Okay, so those kind of reintroduced her, huh?
Yeah, yep.
Okay, good.
Because the first Eternal was the a Clue Master story, and she shows up partway through.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And did that also reestablish her relationship with Tim?
Yes, they do it. They meet for the first time in that book, in the spoilers, in the very end of the story.
I thought you were going to say they do it in the book. I was like, wait, no. I don't remember that one. Yeah.
No, Bluebird introduces Red Robin and Stephanie. It's, hey, here's somebody I want you to meet, and it's they shake hands.
Yeah.
And
now did they like hit it off, or like are they cat and mouse like they are like in the early Dixon run, or how does their relationship? Because when this detective book starts, they are like boyfriend girlfriend basically.
Yeah.
From the start.
There's not much said because it's in only 3 panels in the last issue, like 51 I think is what it was, maybe 52. But anyway, the way that they draw Stephanie, she's like batting her eyes, and she has this cute little smirk, and Tim's got his hands through his hair like, golly gee shucks, here's this pretty girl. So that was all that went. And then
interesting
in Batman and Robin Eternal, she's kind of in there just sporadically.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I mean, all of us, we're pretty big Stephanie Brown fans, and it was sad to see her version of Batgirl kind of go, when the New 52 started.
I agree.
And aesthetically, I thought it was really interesting that they made her costume look almost like a hybrid between Spoiler and her version of Batgirl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole rebirth of Spoiler is probably my favorite thing about this whole run. I really feel like Tynion redefined her as a character.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, she is just not arm candy for Tim Drake. She's actually, they do a lot of interesting things with her in this book. Mm-hmm. And they start her out like, she, for the most part, she's like Tim Drake's moral compass, for a lot of the book.
Yeah, his voice of reason.
His voice, yeah, exactly. And then when he's not there, when Tim Drake is gone, spoilers, they do a lot of interesting things with her too. So did you guys appreciate that overall in the run?
I did, mostly. I mean, like, when I think of Stephanie Brown, I mostly think of like war games and war crimes, and how she, she's trying
has
to
the best of
Batman,
intentions,
and it doesn't always work out. Whereas this Stephanie Brown, she doesn't take anything from anybody. She knows what she's going to do. She doesn't care what Batman thinks. She doesn't want to play capes and tights anymore. She wants to move on from this life, and she wants to do it with Tim. And that's like her whole motivation now, in the run. I feel is just, Tim, we can move on from this. We can evolve. We don't have to do this anymore. And, it was just great to see her take initiative and just really not just be like kind of clueless and only know half of what's going on, but to really take charge and just do what she thinks is the right thing for her.
Yeah, and she was one when the New 52 happened. There were so many questions of like, well, what was in continuity, what was not? Was she ever Robin? Was she ever Batgirl? And DC didn't release this book of like, well, here's what New 52 is. They played coy. They were like, oh well, people make their own continuity and you can create your own. But we're like, but was she Batgirl? And then eventually, as the New 52 progressed, we kind of realized like, oh, all that stuff is now gone, and this at least brought it back in its own special way, which for fans, it's just awesome.
Yeah, so I guess the next character would be Batwoman. And Batwoman to me is always kind of a wild card. I've always enjoyed reading stories with her, particularly when Batwoman herself was the highlight of Detective Comics. Believe it or not, a few years ago, that was the book to read Batwoman in, was Detective Comics for quite a while.
Thanks to Darkseid, right?
Yeah. What?
Thanks to Darkseid.
Yeah, he like Omega sanctioned Batman away, and they needed someone.
Oh
to
yeah, that's
book.
why.
That
because,
was the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, Batman was Dick Grayson as Batman, right? And then you had Detective Comics with Batwoman,
and Lex Luthor was the star of Action Comics at the same time.
Of Action Comics,
was, like, their big thing.
I actually liked that Action Comics run.
Oh, it was great.
That was a cool suit for Luthor.
Yeah. So like Batwoman is interesting because she's always been a character that is very militant, but always kind of works alone for the most part, other than her dad that helps her, her general dad. So to bring her in with this kind of militant type of experience to kind of lead this team, I thought was interesting, but I also knew that it was going to lead to conflict along the way.
Yeah, it seems like standard Batwoman to me. Like I didn't think he really went over the top or really did anything really new with the character, but I did like how he wrote her backstory and everything with her father and all that stuff. And it was kind of like that raid where they got kidnapped, and that was really cool. And I was really into that. And I forget what issue that was, but I mean, there are things about Batwoman that I didn't really like about the book. Like I've always been weary about people being related to Bruce Wayne, and that's always been kind of an iffy thing for me, but overall, she was good. She's not one of the highlights, but she's not like something I don't like. But she's not like Spoiler, Orphan, Clayface are like the top three that I got out of this run, and Batwoman's just kind of in the middle for me personally.
I was always kind of cold on Batwoman. This is the one character I was like, oh, okay, Batwoman's in here. I was never. I don't think I read much. I didn't have probably read much of Batwoman at all, really. If there was a book that had her in, and I was like, oh, okay, I get Batwoman, but I didn't get, and I understand her. So I got a really big crash course. So I went into this that she was the low tier on this book, and I was kind of like, oh, she's going to be kind of front and center for a while. And by the end of it, I was like, I really like this character. So she was somebody that was kind of my throwaway character coming into it. I'm like, well, everybody's on this team that I like. But, there's Batwoman. When I came out of it, I thought, I may have to start picking up the Batwoman title.
The first like couple issues of that Batwoman title are really cool. I think like isn't like Alfred's daughter like her like Alfred and everything, and they're on like a yacht and they're doing crime, they're solving crimes in other places. Like it was pretty cool. Like I appreciated it. I definitely picked up like the first 5-6 issues of Batwoman. I was into it.
Yeah, I think it's Alfred's niece or something, but her last name's Pennyworth also. But, okay. Yeah, but Batwoman was really, really good. It was weird because when the books first started, her and Tim Drake kind of almost had the same role on the team. It was a little like, which one's the second in command? Yeah, and then Tim Drake gets taken out by Mr. Oz for a while, and so then it's just she was kind of like the field commander. Like Batman's the general, and she's the field commander, and I thought it worked really well.
Yeah. So and we'll get more into what happens with Batwoman as we go on. The next character would be Orphan, which Orphan is Cassandra Cain, and to have what I saw in the book to me was two former Batgirls in another universe, I guess, in the same book. It was a really interesting idea to me, and I thought like, oh, that's interesting. Are they just throwing them in just to have them in? That are they going to compete for story time, or are they going to be able to be fleshed out? And of course, I was completely that's absolutely happened. They were great. They were explored very well in the book. I think Cassandra Cain, this version of Cassandra Cain was introduced in, was it Batman and Robin Eternal?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. And I guess that's the kind of thing. I mean, this whole book is kind of a quasi, or is kind of a sequel to those. I think we mentioned that earlier. And it was interesting to see her in this new light. You know, she's another person that is, you know, very insular and, you know, solitary, and because of the way that she, you know, her life has been, she is not very, a whole heck she's not a very social person. So to see her thrown into this team and have to work on a team and communicate with people was very interesting.
It was fun seeing her like just go about her daily business in Gotham too, like how she would try to like figure out how to interact and how to do things with people, and how she would spy, and like she'd take a perch up in like a giant auditorium and watch like ballet dancers, and she'd incorporate it in her fighting. And there was like a cool, I think it was like 940s. I think Eddie Barrows might have drawn like this crazy like silhouette of her like fighting, and there was like dancing in the background. It was really cool stuff. And I like the Lady Shiva and Orphan arc might be one of my favorite, maybe first, second favorite parts of the run, like one of the little mini arcs, and I just thought it was so well done. And I appreciated like just how she like evolved and how she relied on Clayface, and how they had this bond, the two of them, that you didn't really expect. Like you would never expect Orphan and Clayface to have like a thing, a close friendship, kindredship going into the book. Like you never would have thought of that, but Tynion just did it perfectly, and it was great to see.
Yeah, it was very natural and organic. It wasn't like, hey, here's one panel we meet. Here's the next panel, we're best friends. Like it slowly grew over the issues, and
they truly cared about each other.
Yeah. And here's this actor who uses his words, and here's someone who can't use words and uses the language of movement. It was just a fabulous dynamic. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, that she was one of the big characters in the New 52 that I was really wanting. You can say, oh, where's Wally and where's Stephanie? But I was like, where's Cassandra? As organic as, Tynion wrote her, like her introduction in No Man's Land was so cool, getting to see her, and then she gets the Batgirl title. So that was something when the New 52 hit. I was like, that's a travesty as a Bat fan that Cassandra Cain is missing. And when Convergence hit, and you saw little glimpses here and there of her, and when she finally got in Batman and Robin Eternal, I was like, finally. So that was another big draw for me in this book, was Cassandra Cain front and center in Detective Comics.
That was like one of the small gripes for me coming into Rebirth, is like you lose Cassandra Cain as Batgirl, but you get Barbara Gordon as Batgirl, and she's not, she's kind of like dual Oracle.
But
Batgirl
she wasn't Batgirl for a while, because before that, you had Cassandra Cain as Batgirl, but then after that, you had Stephanie Brown as Batgirl.
That's true.
And Cassandra was the Black Bat, right?
Was the Black Bat, which was only appeared in a couple issues of Red Robin. So she'd already kind of been off the radar even before the New 52. Mm. Yeah, and then just to have her disappear completely when the New 52 started, to having her, now she's back in the Eternal, Batman and Robin Eternal. That's and now being front and center in this book. And again, that's the thing. The aesthetically, again, since she was a former Batgirl, it was cool to see them kind of take echoes of that costume, but not make her Batgirl, but still looks like a ninja and stuff. So I mean, it kind of, they differentiated themselves.
And it has a huge payoff at the end, which is great for both of them.
It does. I can't wait to get to that later. That's gonna be a good discussion. And that was the other thing too, because both her, Cassandra, the way that her life has gone, she is, I guess, starts out as mute. She can't really talk because all of her mental energy has gone into fighting and how to be,
she just processes it at such an advanced level. She just can't really do anything.
Yeah, she has a
physical sense.
Exactly. So her Batgirl was always had a mask that covered her entire face, even her mouth. But then again, so did Spoiler. So I thought that was that the way they solved that was a very interesting way to make both of Spoiler and Orphan's outfits not be carbon copies of each other.
Well, she originally took that outfit from Huntress, right? Huntress was the Batgirl in No Man's Land, right?
Right.
And you were mentioning to Pete her relationship with Clayface, and so I guess that's the obvious next character to go over. He was I guess even more of a wild card than Batwoman, because you just say Clayface and you're like, oh, huh, Clayface. I mean, he's obviously traditionally a Batman villain, and but just to have this character is not to have be a joke here, but he is kind of moldable. He is kind of a clean slate. You can kind of morph him into what you need him to be. That's what Tynion ended up doing. Just the concept of this guy, he was a villain, but he was a reluctant villain, or was remorseful. And you always talk about Batman comics or Batman stories where he always wishes he could rehabilitate the villains instead of just sending them back to the revolving door of Arkham Asylum or something like that. So it was very interesting to have a book to kind of face that head on, and not only that, but just use him for straight up cool factor. Because in battle scenes and fight scenes, like, he can do some really cool, interesting things. But Tynion was able to find a way to have him interact in very interesting ways with a lot of the other characters. And his arc in this entire run of books is one of my favorites, and most emotional, I think.
I've always had a soft spot in my heart for Clayface because Batman Animated Series did it so well, but that was Matt Hagen, so now you get a different Clayface, the original Clayface, Basil Karlo, and it was just refreshing to, like you said, just see a criminal that wants to reform and then wants to do good, and because of what he's done, and slowly but surely, like, throughout the run, Tynion just gives you maybe like a few panels, maybe a page of this Clayface's backstory, leading up to like this just fantastic annual. With involving the first victim and what do they call themselves? The victims of Gotham or something like that?
Victim Syndicate.
The
Victim Syndicate, yeah. And just using this other Clayface that is basically his responsibility, and he basically essentially created her out of his own stupidity, and now he's trying to repent for that. And it was really, that was great. And then you team up with him trying to help Cassandra and mold. Now I gotta say mold again, because for lack of a better term, mold Cassandra into like a better person and just bring out her ability to communicate, like you said, with an actor. And it was just all great stuff. I mean, Clayface really kind of stole the show, and it was really, the pinnacle was that annual.
Yeah, and Rob, you mentioned like Batwoman was your meh character. Clayface was my meh character. I'd never been quite the huge Clayface fan because he always seemed a little too supernatural, or he seemed more like a Superman villain than a Batman villain to me. And when I first was introduced to Clayface was in Detective Comics, I think it's like 607 or 608. It was a story called
the Mud Pack stuff.
Yeah. And so it was very confusing being a young kid new into comics, and there were like 4 Clayfaces, and then even in the Nightfall, the Night Quest series, there was like 2 Clayfaces and a baby Clayface, and then the animated series had a Clayface, and then the Batman had a different Clayface who was like a cop.
It's almost like there's never just one.
Right. So he always seemed like a Superman villain, not a Batman villain, and always like I could never really get into one of them, because the next time I'd read something or watch something, it'd be different. But this series totally changed my opinion on Clayface. I loved Clayface in this. I was rooting for him. I could feel his pain and his self-doubt. And it all starts in that very first issue where he's sitting in a movie theater and just he's not hurting anybody. He just wanted to see his old movie and see what, he was and what he had lost. And that just sucks you into want to know more about this character. And then as it progressed, it was a redemption story that you were really, really rooting for this guy. So it totally changed my opinion on Clayface, kind of like it changed Rob's opinion on Batwoman.
Yeah, Clayface for me, I was instantly intrigued, other than we're having a bad guy on the team. But I can't remember which issue it is, but Batman says sometimes the villain or whoever it is only that way just because of a circumstance. They weren't born into evil. It's whatever happened to them caused it. And I believe that there's some rehabilitation or redemption that can be done for Clayface. And I think he says in the movie theater, can he just, before you take me away, can we just wait 45 more minutes so he can watch the end of this movie. All like everybody's running from him, and all he wants to do is watch. And I was like, okay, James, you've got me on this. And I was a big Clayface fan from the animated series and just the different versions of Clayface. I thought, oh, look at all these different versions of Clayface. But this is one of my favorites, and so much so a Clayface. Not to get an action figure thing, but there's a new line of Mattel action figures, and the Build-A-Figure is this version of Clayface.
It's amazing.
And I've got to collect all these so I can have this gigantic Clayface.
Amazing.
This Clayface, at times, going back to the artwork, was very scary. He almost like at times had like a xenomorph mouth when he's like, his big, just flowing
two mouths. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was really he never really looked like just this running puddle of mud. He was always intimidating, and he was doing these, grand, just like things with his, he was slinging mud and making like giant, like, I don't know, like Sandman squares and spiked ball hammers. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was always doing crazy stuff. And then they used like the excess clay as like a war room for training, and that plays in Fall of the Batman. I think that plays a big part in the conclusion of that. Yeah. And it was just the way Tynion made him a sympathetic character, yet like a strategic like tool for Batman was very, very. It was just interesting, and I appreciate what he did with that character.
Yeah. So that's the core team. There's two other members that join later on. Do you guys want to cover them now, or you want to wait until we get to them in the flow of the arcs?
Well, one technically starts the book,
and
then totally disappears. Because in a
coma. Exactly. So, well, I guess we'll cover them real quick. I mean, the one that you talked about, obviously, that starts this arc is Azrael, and to know that he wasn't part of the main team, I wasn't expecting him. And then, of course, he shows up on page 1 of the very first issue. I was like, I did like a happy dance. I was like, oh man, Azrael. But then he gets taken out really fast, and then I was super sad. But because I kind of knew this book was going to be here for a while, it felt like this wasn't here just for no reason, And when Azrael gets on the team, he gets on the team in a big way, and he is, it's a very interesting concept for Azrael. Again, almost like Tim Drake, I was waiting and hoping for Jean-Paul Valley Azrael to return to DC Comics, and he came back in Batman and Robin Eternal, but this book furthered his place in the run, and where they take him in his story later on in this arc of Detective Comics, I could not have been more happy with.
Going into the story, I was never a huge Azrael fan. I didn't like how he just kind of like, I felt like he just rambled on talking funny. I feel like he never really made sense, and I had a hard time understanding him. But what Tynion did with a lot of characters in his run is he made this my favorite version of that character, and I got really into the Saint Dumas stuff and the system and just everything that he did with this character. And I was no longer like, just, oh God, I got to read this guy just kind of talking funny. It's like I was reading Thor, it just doesn't read well to me. But Tynion made it so fluid and effortless, and he eventually to get to the updated Asbats, that was really cool. And I think he did a great job in that as well.
Yeah, and he was able to add like the religious aspect without being too heavy-handed with it, but just enough so that you remember that Jean-Paul was from this like religious order of like warrior monks that programmed him, but not enough where you feel like he's just this like preachy televangelist guy or something. So yeah, once again, he was able to just really give him a voice unique from all these other characters in the book, but felt like really authentic to what we grew up with in the 90s and the 2000s.
Yeah,
this book and Batman the Cult really balance like comic books and like going over the top of the like, religion. I feel like those are two books that stand out for that type of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And just that first page of the surprise of seeing Azrael on there, it brings back all that Nightfall stuff and that history that you already have with the character. Go, oh wow, I had kind of forgot about Jean-Paul. Even having him in Batman and Robin Eternal, I thought, oh, that'd be really cool if they do something with him again. Yeah, they probably won't. And then, midway through the series, here he is as a prominent member of the team. So that was really good. And like you said, I think this is becoming my favorite version of this character. And, we know he's going to go on to bigger things after this too. So that was really cool to see him part of this team.
Yeah. And so the last character of all the team members is Batwing. And I thought this was a really cool addition. He comes into the story a little bit later after the first arc, after Tim Drake is taken off the table. And Batwing, the character, kind of came as part of the New 52, but he started out as David Zavimbe. I mean, he was a part of Batman Incorporated. And that book, I read, what's interesting is I read that book all the way until it switched characters. So at some point, David Zavimbe hangs up the armored Batman suit, and it gets handed off to Lucius Fox's son, Luke Fox, and it turns into kind of like a Batman Iron Man kind of hybrid kind of character, where I guess Batman sends him on missions and things like that. And but I didn't read that section of that book because that was around the time where I was just kind of tuning out completely of the New 52, unfortunately. But I always kind of liked the character or the idea behind the character, and to see him kind of show up after Tim Drake was gone, he kind of filled up that tech role, that tech side of Tim, and his interactions with Azrael, because Azrael has a lot of tech implications with his religious implications, and he was a really interesting character to kind of pit there between all the other characters.
Batwing, Luke Fox was the weakest character, I feel like, for me in this run. A few times he had some really good back and forth with Azrael that was funny, and he wasn't expecting that. But what really, the thing about Luke Fox that I appreciated the most was whenever he was in Fox Tech, Gordon's Robo-Rabbit Batsuit would make casual appearances and cameos, and he'd do funny things with his face.
Yeah.
And that was the best part about it for me. So, but he definitely is on the bottom of my list as for all the characters in this run. I feel like he wasn't really developed, and he was really the biggest side character, I guess, out of everything.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I'd agree too. Especially when Tim Drake comes back, and there just wasn't a lot of room for him in the books. And I wonder if James, I don't even want to say the last name because I'm going to say it wrong, but Tynion left the book, whether he had more plans for him if he was going to continue, and then left the book a little bit ahead of schedule to do this Justice League thing, or this actually felt more like a springboard for a Batwing series than actually having Batwing in the series. But the times that he was there, the little that he was, he kind of reminded me of like an Elon Musk, kind of like a billionaire genius who, would forget to, put on pants, but build this incredible robot all day or something like that.
I do feel like he was drawn a lot like Iron Man at times, like he was doing the hand blast pose very often. So piggyback off what Ryan was saying earlier.
Yeah. This was probably after Batwoman. This was my next character, and whether probably the move to put Tim off the table came from DC, and I kind of felt like James went, well, crap, now I can't use Tim. Who else can I use? Oh, here's Batwing. He can facilitate this role that I would have rather much had Tim be in. And I liked Batwing in this, but he was by the end of it was kind of the bottom of the barrel for me. Was a good character and had the good moments between Azrael and Batwing. I wish there were more of that. In certain pages, he would just be drawn in there. I'm like, oh, look, there's Batwing in the background, not really doing anything, but does have some importance in some later stories. But I always kind of liked the character. But if I was picking my Batman team to go out and fight crime, I don't think he would be on the top of my list.
No, I feel like that team would be 3 characters. One of them would be Batman. My team would be very small, personally.
Yeah. So, man, we've talked for quite a while about the setup and the characters. Are you guys ready to get into the arcs of this run?
Yeah,
let's do it.
Okay, so here we go with the first arc. It's issues 934 to 947 issues. It's called Rise of the Batman. And the synopsis, all these synopsises you will hear are from Comic Vine. And the synopsis is as follows. An elite fighting force modeled after the Dark Knight has invaded the streets of Gotham. Their armor, weaponry, and surveillance equipment are based on Batman's tech and tactics, but they're far beyond anything he's ever seen. And while these Batmen's motives remain a mystery, their targets are all too clear. They're gunning for Gotham's vigilantes. Batman knows he can't face this foe alone, and neither can the crime fighters caught in the crossfire. So, with Batwoman, secretly Bruce Wayne's cousin, Kate Kane, as his general, he's organizing the next generation of Gotham heroes into an army. So, like I said, this is the setup for the book and the characters and all that stuff. And what did you think of this arc, Rob?
I thought this was a great introduction to the story. I'm glad it didn't start with we're already into it and all the team members are here. It's piecing together the dream team of, Batman's not picking Nightwing, he's not picking Red Hood, he's picking each one of these characters for a specific reason, because the threat is going to be greater than, hey, let's just get the typical Bat family and we'll do our typical thing. That he wants to make sure he has all of the avenues covered. So, and I think James does that really well in setting it up and having the threat play out. And then while doing this too, also takes a character and rips him right out from us. So we get through this very first arc of Rebirth and going, wow, what an amazing arc. And holy crap, that really hurts. We get some great emotional, tug at the heartstring beats. We get some, laugh out loud moments in this book where by the time you get to the end of this first arc, you start realizing, I think we're going to be on a very special ride in this, and introducing old characters and just new concepts, I think was just done very, very well in this very first arc.
The first arc was really great. When you started reading it, you didn't really know what was going to be quote unquote reborn or put into this. And you could tell, like, as we talked earlier, like they're bringing back these awesome things from the 90s and 2000s. But I thought the Batman reminded me a lot, and other people said this too, of the Arkham Knight from the video game series. So I was really interested as like, what is coming over from the world of video games as well. And it turned out it was more just like the look of the characters. They really didn't bring stuff over, but it was a cool look. It was a cool thing to incorporate. And being a Batwoman fan of the original series and her run in Detective, it was pretty shocking to realize, like, this character who you really liked, her father, turns out to be, spoilers, the big bad guy. And it's like, this can't be. It can't be. That not him. And then as the series progressed, you realize it was a really layered character, and it wasn't your evil genius to take over the world kind of like one-dimensional thing going on. And it was a storyline, that relationship between Batwoman and her father, and what he was doing and what she was doing and what Batman was doing, and how far are you willing to go in this crusade. It became a real like theme and thread of the book that was really fascinating and just kept you wanting to read the next issue. So I think this was a great springboard. And now that we can look in like retrospect of the whole run, it's so cool that the first issue or the first arc was called Rise of the Batman, and then the last arc is called Batman Eternal. There's like that connection between the beginning and the end. I really like that. Yeah. And seeing, and I know we'll talk about it in a little bit, but seeing the relationship between Batwoman and her father in the last arc too. In this arc, it's really cool to reread it and see it play out. So it was a really, really great first. It was a really strong first arc that let you know that this was going to be a strong book coming out of Rebirth.
Yeah, I mean, what I took out of the first arc was just kind of like it really springboarded Batwoman to get her own solo series. Like I feel like it was that it leaned heavily on her, and like you said, her father, and how while he is the villain of the book, is he really the villain because he thinks he's doing the right thing? He feels like he is doing the right thing for
That's
him.
A great point.
And Kathy, like, and he's in a sense, he's basically trying to do this to be closer to her. He's like, you have this military personality. Now, do you want to work for Batman and kind of be against the law, or like, can I draw you in to this more structured environment that we're used to as a family, so we can be together because of how they lost their mother, and did she have a sister?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like that is, it was kind of like the way to bring his daughter back into his life after she, just after they're not together, and the connection and the characters, and that's where Tynan's at his strongest, when he just gets you to really appreciate and care about these characters, and you feel for this father who's trying to get his daughter back, and that was a strong point.
Well, isn't that the biggest thing about the quote unquote villain? If he's not the mustache twirling, haha, I've got a bomb, I'm gonna blow up a bridge, that type of thing. It's the villain that makes you look at it and go, oh, holy crap, I think he's right, where you start realizing he's looking out for his own, he's looking out for his family. And I'm sorry if Batman's going to be collateral damage in this, but look at the greater thing that we're trying to do. I think that's a testament of a good, antagonist, if you will.
Yeah, and what better kind of antagonist to put something, moral quandaries like that on than a character that, if you are a Batwoman fan, you have, it's all. It felt to me like a reader almost the way it must have felt like to Batwoman reading it, because, like I said, I had read Batwoman comics for a long time with her character, and her father was almost like this stalwart, unflinching symbol. He was like her Alfred, basically. And you go on that journey with them, and then you get to this book, and then you find out that, in the background, he had always been kind of planning this or doing this and leading up to this. It did not come across as just, we're shaking it up just to shake it up. Tynion found a way into this character that made it felt natural and believable, and it ended up providing a series-wide, and not just a singular antagonist, but a whole force that opposes all the characters. And I thought that was a very interesting angle to kind of take it with him.
Do you want to talk about how the end of this first arc ends?
Yeah, and that the reveal of General Kane being the antagonist, that would have been the nice shocking twist in that arc, if not for the end of this first arc. And that's the thing. This was one of the longest arcs in the whole run. It's like 7 issues, and which is appropriate. I mean, it gets you used to the idea of the team. The team gets created, and then you have this turn, a reveal of who the antagonist is, and then you get this just giant gut punch of basically Tim Drake dying. At least he dies to the eyes of the characters in the story itself. And we all kind of knew something was up as we started to see more solicitations for the issues, but
nobody dies in comics.
Well, yeah, we all know that, but again, we're going to talk about this, is how smartly this was done in terms of how these things are done, and how we as comic book readers interpret them and go along the stories with these characters. Like, what did you guys think of this when it was unfolding, and then when it actually happened?
I was surprised they did it so early. I'm surprised that it's like, you're going to bring back Tim Drake, traditional looking Tim Drake, and then within 7 issues, he's gone, but it really kind of carried the emotion of the book, the emotion of Spoiler and Batman through a couple of arcs. Tim's absence really hit them the hardest, and they were just downright just miserable for a certain period of time,
I also think the setting up who Tim Drake was and seeing him look familiar, and you like, all right, great, we've got Robin here, Red Robin, he's back. It's the Tim Drake that we all...
They show how much he has to live for. They set up all this stuff with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, my wife...
They get you really invested.
My wife would be the one, if we're watching a movie, going, oh, he got an acceptance letter to college. He has a future. No, he doesn't.
Yeah.
He's got greater things. And that was one of the other beats is... After Tim's supposed death, Bruce has to muster up the courage to, be Papa to Stephanie and say it's okay. Tim chose this life, and Stephanie has to hand him the letter. It's like you don't understand what Tim gave up, and seeing that emotional rawness in Batman, and seeing a Batman, if he didn't cry, but you saw his hands tremble and drop the letter, where you just go, oh man, it was that weight in the history of the character, and how much that character meant to Batman, where at the end of the issue, you're just going, I get what Tynion's really doing in this. And even though Tim wasn't going to be in the book for a while, you knew, okay, this is going to pay off somehow, somewhere.
The relationship he had with the both of them throughout the whole arc is so impactful. And you could tell because they both break down or they just show intense emotion several times throughout the book when they talk about him and when he comes back or when they're arguing, and you could, and it's drawn beautifully too. So the artists deserve just as much credit because it translates visually, you read the words, but they need to draw it and they make you believe that these characters are in pain, and it really worked so well. And so, I mean, everyone was just A-list on this. It really, really worked.
Yeah, and the art too in almost all the books, I think, had a special layout where he really used 2 pages as one, and then I guess
that's a big theme.
Yeah, and DC, I guess, was
a lot of splash page endings too.
Yeah, nice enough to move all the ads to the back, which I know they don't like to do. They only do that if it's really special. So it really tied all the books together and the art together, and really was a really cool. Every now and again, I'd lose my place. I'm like, wait, which panel am I supposed to read? But it was a really cool effect.
Yeah, and I think the linchpin for me that made this whole thing work is because, like you said, like you guys were saying, we all know that death, for the most part, is not a permanent fixture in comics. If somebody dies, of course, they can come back later. There's 1,000,001 different ways that characters can be brought back. But what Tynion did in this, is that right after Tim Drake dies, they let you know he's dead to the characters, but he's around, and this mysterious figure, Dr. Oz, has basically, quote, taken him off the table, which to us as readers know that, okay, Tim's still alive, he's around, but he won't be present in these people's lives, and to them, he's dead. So that made it a lot easier. It was like having your cake and eating it too. It's like the whole Harry Potter kind of thing going on, because it's like you're more willing to go along with the story. You're not going to rage quit and say, oh, well, Tim Drake's dead, I'm dropping this book. If you're a Tim Drake fan, like we all are, he's going to come back at some point, but now you are still willing to go on the emotional journey with the rest of the characters and see how it affects them moving forward for the foreseeable future. And I thought that was a very appropriate way to handle something like that.
I do wonder, was this something Tynion planned on, or was this something that DC said, hey, look, we want you to kind of tie this in with our Dr. Oz that's going on with Superman in action right now. So did Tynion always want Tim to get, essentially killed, and but how is he going to come back? And so that stuff's always interesting to me, like how closely they work with the other writers to try to okay, well, this is how this goes. So I always found that interesting. Because it does it mingles with the Superman books.
Yeah, and I got the sense, it'll be great to ask him hopefully soon, that it kind of seemed like DC wanted it to be Tim. And I'm almost thinking it was probably Jeff Johns, because I think all of the writers in the beginning had to pitch to Jeff Johns like what you're doing with all these Rebirth titles, so we have like a unified front. We're kind of keeping the theme of Rebirth. So
that guy's too busy. Yeah,
I'm assuming it was for a greater story, and I'm even wondering if that was going to pay off somewhere in the Doomsday Clock. That it didn't, because the end of the run is over, and we'll talk when we get there. Some dialogue has changed during the Button storyline of where Tim Drake was going to be reintroduced, and dialogue got changed in Detective of how that was going on. So I think they had a plan, and then after a while it kind of like fell apart or didn't come out the way they wanted, and then A Lonely Place of Living happened.
Yeah, the good thing is, because for the most part this whole run is very self-contained. If you don't know that, it really kind of, I don't think, matters a whole heck of a lot if you just read all the issues straight through, not knowing all that backstory.
Yeah, very true, very true.
Yeah, no, I agree. It definitely, I don't think I'm missing anything. I feel like everything's self-explained within the story. And the whole Dr. Oz thing actually, I think, worked out pretty cool. You get, the futuristic Drake, and you get that Doomsday, so that stuff's always fun to see. Yeah.
So I guess we'll move on to the next arc, and that's directly after this one. And I think it probably comes as no surprise to all of us. I would assume that this is everyone's least favorite arc, and I did just say that this is fairly self-contained, but it's self-contained except for this, which is the only crossover that that affected Detective Comics during this run, I believe, which is this 6-issue crossover, which is Night of the Monster Men, and it was issues 941 and 942. So the synopsis for this one is it's the first Batman crossover of DC Rebirth. It's the storm of the century, and it's headed straight for Gotham City. The guardians of the sprawling urban center, Nightwing, Batwoman, and the Batman himself think they prepared for the worst, but they have no idea. Thanks to the machinations of the macabre scientist Dr. Hugo Strange, the storm has unleashed a rain of monsters upon the city. Colossal creatures are stomping through the streets, terrorizing the citizens and challenging the skills of even Gotham's greatest heroes. Can the Dark Knight and his allies stem the tide of destruction, or will the Night of the Monster Men mark the fall of the Bat? I'll kick this off real quick. What was cool about this to me, although I thought it was kind of the weakest arc part of the whole story here, is that it was a 6-issue crossover between, I believe, Detective Batman and Nightwing. And what was fun about it was that since the books were all twice monthly, this whole story was over in like a month. Like some weeks you would get in and you'd get like parts 2 and 3 or something like that. And so that was kind of a cool way to read this. And Detective, it retained Tynion as the writer of 2 of these issues, or co-writer of 2 of these issues.
With Steve Orlando, I believe.
Yeah, Orlando.
Yeah, and 942 ended up being the finale of the story, so it's kind of cool that it got to end in Detective, and it feeds right into the next issue. And the other thing is that the events of this story, I believe, you guys might want to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what happens in the story actually most affects Detective Comics, it doesn't really pop up again in Batman or Nightwing as far as I remember, but what happens after the story in terms of Monster Town actually like maintains it. It's an event that actually affects Detective Comics afterwards.
Yeah, you're correct in saying that.
So what do you guys think of this one?
Again, yeah, I agree with you. I definitely feel it's the weakest of the run. I don't like it as much as I like the original Monster Men. I felt like Batman, when he's giant monsters, aren't my thing. I kind of like him doing street level like crime, personally. But you put Batman and Nightwing together, and I'll be into it. But yeah, I wasn't a big fan of this whole arc.
Well, I was the same way. Matter of fact, I still have yet to read it. I collected it, and it's
jeez.
I know it's in the trade that I'm currently looking at, and these 2 issues only they're in Detective just because numerically, and you can pull these 2 out, and it really not affect James Tynion's run at all. And it was something like, I think I'll read this on Halloween, which I think that's about when this was coming out. It's like, hey, we've got this crossover,
yeah.
and it's Halloween time. And so I felt...
But were you not confused when they start talking about Monster Town?
Oh,
later on?
I mean, I had known what the story was, and I knew that, this is from that event. So there may have been certain things they were saying, but I was like, oh, that's probably Monster Town. So yeah, this was the only thing in Detective I haven't read yet.
The 2 variants were really cool because it looks like Batman versus Kaiju. So if you're still on that Batman ninja kick and and you want to get some of that going on, you check that out.
Okay. What do you think, Terence?
Yeah, so I'm in agreement with you guys. It was definitely the weakest of the run, but I did like the fact that I had read, a million Batman crossover books kind of like this, and they have these big events and then you never hear or see of it ever again. And I did like that it did have ramifications through where it would be mentioned or Monster Town would come in, and it does in some way introduce that doctor, which I don't know her name, but she's working with Clayface to find a cure through Monster Town, and I thought she was a pretty interesting character. I don't know where she was ever from before or where we'll see her again, but she was kind of cool, and is definitely an arc, definitely an entrance to trying to find a cure for Clayface.
Dr. Victoria October, right?
Okay, yeah. Was she in something else, or was she a new character?
I don't think so. I believe she was created in this run. I think she's a new character.
Cool.
I liked her Cruella de Vil vibe, though. So she had that cool hair going.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that this is a transgender character also, and that kind of...
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, that took me by surprise reading the book, and I actually thought that was a very interesting kind of take, because you just read the story, and then way later in the arc, in the run, it gets brought up with working with Clayface, and there's like a whole conversation about her trying to,
I need to reread that.
Fix him and stuff. Yeah, well, it's like a whole panel. It almost comes out of nowhere, but it's this really kind of beautifully written part about, I felt this way inside, and I'm different, and blah blah blah. And they kind of she compares her life to what Clayface is going through, and I thought that was actually a really interesting way of approaching that in a comic book.
She had a cool like mini arc herself. Like she really came onto the scene like really cocky and confident, and like, I can do this, I can find this cure. And then like some point she's like, no, I can't do this. Like I can't figure this out. And it was cool watching her evolve as a new character. It's a really fresh character.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like it's this run's own semi Leslie Tompkins kind of character that comes into play. So,
a little bit more witty and snappy than Leslie.
Yeah. And it works on so many levels. The whole idea of her being, or him being trans and changing, and Clayface being able to change but wanting to change, and who you are really inside, and how does that represent what you are outside, and does it matter if how you feel inside matches what you look like outside? And it almost feels like they didn't go into it enough. It would have been better if they maybe had a little more time to explore that. But it definitely is a really great, playground, I guess, for those concepts and ideas that are like on the forefront of news and debate today. So it was really well done. Okay,
so after the Night of the Monster Men, I think things pick up quite a bit with this next arc. It's the Victim Syndicate. It's issues 943 to 947. It's 5 issues. And a lot of heavy things happen in this arc. The synopsis is that innocent victims maimed or broken by Batman's greatest enemies band together, and they blame Batman and his fellow vigilantes for what happened to them just as much as they blame the psychopaths who hurt them. Batman and his newly trained team of allies must take on these troubled souls, but one of Batman's teammates can't help but think they might have a point. So for me, I thought this was a really interesting concept. Of course, we've just been talking about Clayface. One of the characters in here, we come to learn, was one of Clayface's first victims, and she has been completely, mangled and turned into kind of a semi-Clayface kind of person herself. So that was kind of a really interesting point, not just to see, because a lot of times you read these Batman stories and, you can just say, the Joker just killed 800 people with his last caper, and you just don't, and you just move on to the next story. But to have characters like this that are still around, that come back up to kind of directly confront Batman and his ideas, or what he's doing with the city and his methods, I thought was a very interesting kind of angle.
I thought it was really cool. I really liked this story a lot. I really, when reviewing for Batman Film, I was really a big fan of the first victim, and he just kind of like pops in the scene. He popped on the scene, and he's just wreaking havoc, and he turned the public against Batman. Like at one point, he incites this gigantic riot, and they think the Joker's doing it, and he's literally just causing all this chaos and havoc. And he was really just like, he really made a name for himself, I feel like, in like, the Gotham underground. And then I just felt like it didn't really pay off on the last issue. But I was really loving like the first 6 issues. I was really all about it, and I feel like Stephanie really kind of stood up and took her ground. And then Anarchy was introduced, correct? And it was just that stuff was really interesting, and like how he tries to persuade her into how she was really like, no, like I don't want to do this. I don't want this life anymore. And it was just there was a lot of cool stuff. So seeing like a cool bunch of new villains and having Stephanie really step up and stand her ground, it was one of the highlights of the run for me, if not the biggest highlight.
Yeah, and we also get Batwing in this story as well. And I thought this was going to be kind of where they reintroduce Harper Row, a.k.a. Bluebird, back into this, because she is here with Cassandra and Stephanie.
Great cameo.
Yeah, I thought, this is really cool. This is where Harper's going to find her footing, and James is going to bring her into this. And she's kind of like that outlier character that she kind of just pops back in and out. And like you said, a cameo aspect of it, like, there's Harper, Which
she feels like a character Tynion would take and just run with, you know?
I
and
know,
like
that's
really redefine her.
That's the one character I thought, this character is built for James to write with. So if there's one disappointment for me out of this whole series, it's not him using Harper Row at all. So anytime somebody says, you know, oh, the Bat family's too big, she's the epitome of the Bat family being too big. Like, we're creating new characters just for the sake of creating new characters. And then that's why the family's too big. Is like, I know everybody wants to create the next big thing, but you wrote this really interesting character and nobody's done anything with her since, you know, the Eternal time. And Scott Snyder is the one that actually created her, and he didn't do much with her at all. So I like the character, but she's just not used very well. But it was great to see her in this, and I thought the story was really well. And the first victim, I was right there with you, Peter. I was waiting for this big payoff in the story for the villain, and it was
so grand. Like he built this like epic. He really broke Batman down in front of the entire city. The mayor was on. You had the mayor calling out Batman. The public is turned against Batman. Like, no one has any faith. Batwoman's questioning everything. You know, like, the team is broken apart.
Stephanie is willing to use Batman's secret identity to if you don't step down, you don't back off of this, and Batman does the whole thing of like, well, if she's going to do it, she's going to do it, and Batwoman is pushing at him like she's going to unravel the whole entire thing because of the influence of the first victim. So I was right there with you. I was like, oh, I wonder how this is going to pay off, and it kind of ended on a little bit of a lull where I still liked it, but I don't think the end of the story landed as strong as it could have.
At the end, when I saw the like Clayface Godzilla, I just kept thinking like Matthew Broderick, and I was like, I can't. No, you guys, come on, how'd you do this one?
I guess the payoff is that Spoiler leaves the team. This is where she's gone, right? I mean,
she puts her foot down and she doesn't budge. It was pretty good. It's so cool to see Stephanie do this stuff. It really is.
It's such a good arc, kind of like an Empire Strikes Back lowest point kind of arc for the team after the loss of Tim Drake, to see all the characters kind of react to that, and then this new threat kind of emerges with the Victim Syndicate, and to see how this team is already shaken up team deals with this new threat that's not just a powerful thing. It's like it's a great antithesis to the Colony, this giant army versus this small group of people that are really just set out to just ruin Batman's legacy and this team, and to really ruin their connections. And that's kind of what happens. You have Batwing joining the team early on in this arc, but then at the end you have Spoiler leaving it, and then that has repercussions for the whole rest of the series.
Does the annual come out during this run? Like, I feel like the Clayface...
Yeah, we'll get to it.
Okay.
Yep, we'll get to it.
And oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, what I really liked in this run was the design of all the characters and even their names. You had Madam Crow, Mr. Noxious, Mudface, and the Mute, and they were designed so great. And I also really like that evolution of Stephanie Brown's character, because it is a rebirth from the 90s and the 2000s, but she's more. She's of today. Like, I remember her death, quote unquote death, when she was Robin, and she died, like saying like, was I really a Robin? Was it real? Were you just using me? Like, so much doubt, so much trying to, like, to her dying breath, get the approval of Batman. And here now today, she just doesn't care. She's like, I don't care if you like me, don't like me, think I'm part of the team. I know what I am.
It's so tremendous.
And I'm going to do what I think is right, and you don't scare me, and I am who I am, and I love that about her in this here.
Well, you talk about Tim and Steph being a barometer for each other, or she was the moral compass for Tim. I think that worked in the other way around. Now without Tim there for her, not that she has nothing else to live for, she has nothing else to care for. So if Batman's being a jerk, she doesn't have Tim pulling her cape.
She doesn't have to have a reason to stay.
Yeah, she doesn't have a reason to stay. Nobody pulling her cape going,
the only reason she was there was for Tim.
Right.
Like, that's literally the reason.
Yeah.
And her reason for that was to bring him out. So now she doesn't have to worry about bringing him out. He's gone. She could just go. She thinks he's dead and buried. There's nothing tying her down here anymore. She doesn't want to do this, and it's just great to see her just have this backbone and stand up to Batman and no longer seek his approval. She just doesn't care.
Yeah. And going back to the first victim, I think this might be one of the bigger unsolved mysteries from the rest of the arc. I don't think they ever reveal who the first victim is, do they?
No. I don't think we ever find out.
They mention trying to figure it out, but I don't think that's ever actually revealed. I guess they'll have to wait for another day. But yeah, so the next arc after the Victim Syndicate is Batwoman Begins. It's a 2-issue interlude. And the cool thing is, after a lot of these bigger arcs, you'll get these 1 or 2 issue like little interludes that kind of tie in, set up the next arc and wrap up the previous one kind of deal. And this was a 2-issue interlude focusing on Batwoman, and it kind of resets up Batwoman and some of this stuff that's about to happen. So this is in issues 948 to 949, and the synopsis is this special 2-part interlude spotlights team leader Batwoman. In the wake of Night of the Monster Men, Argus has built a secret research city around the corpse of the mega monster that collapsed in Gotham Harbor, creating Gotham City's newest and most dangerous neighborhood, Monster Town. In issue 948, Batman and Batwoman need to get in there to find out who's been weaponizing monster blood. And in issue 949, the mission faces a deadly complication. The colony wants Jacob Kane back, and they'll kill to set him free. What did you guys think of this 2-issue interlude?
I wasn't a big fan of it. The colony is probably one of the things I like least about the run. While I enjoy Batwoman and seeing the struggle she has with her father, the colony I'm not a big fan of, and I can't stand Colony Prime. He makes his debut in these 2 issues, and his design and everything, it really fell flat for me. And I might say I probably like Monster Men more than this. If I had to rank it, these 2 issues just didn't really do it for me at all.
I'm kind of the same way there. It wasn't till midstream that I really started getting a grasp of who the Batwoman character is. So I read these in haste, and I was like, oh, okay, it's a Batwoman story. It was good. It was wonderfully well written, but I felt like these were written to like, hey, this is why Batwoman needs her series, and it dovetailed off of that to get her series. So that's kind of how I took it. Looking back at it now, I think it's really solid through the whole arc of the series, but it wasn't one that I was really chomping at the bit. I was wanting to get more into more of the team dynamic, and the whole time I was going, okay, so where's Tim?
Yeah. See, I think in the context of the big arc, and if you're like binge reading this, I think it improves, just because it's nice to have this little section of issues set aside to kind of bolster Batwoman and introduce some more Colony stuff with Colony Prime, and it ties in some of the Monster Men stuff too. So for that, I thought it was pretty useful.
Yeah, it's a bit forgettable as we were getting ready to record and I was going through everything again. I kind of had to remind myself, oh yeah, what happens in this one again? And especially in real time as it was coming out, the big League of Shadows crossover, you knew that was coming, so there was really anticipation for that. So this kind of is a little bit forgettable.
Yeah. And, like I said, it is only 2 issues, and it's not part of a giant arc, so it is kind of poised in its own little spot in the arc. But the good thing is that's issue 949 is where that ends, which means the not big issue 950 of Detective Comics happens right after, and that's the next arc, is what we were talking about, is League of Shadows. I think this was probably, other than A Lonely Place of Living, this is probably my second favorite arc of the entire run.
You've got to at least one time say League of Shadows in your Bane voice, though, to introduce it for us. Yeah,
the League of Shadows.
It says issues 950 to 956. It's 7 issues. League of Shadows. Synopsis: Batwoman, an accomplished crime fighter who's overcome the darkest of betrayals. Clayface, a reformed villain whose potential is eclipsed only by his astonishing powers. New heroes like Azrael, an avenging angel, and Batwing, whose incredible armor makes him a true Dark Knight. Led by the Batman himself, this team of Guardians stands ready to protect Gotham City. But the secrets of the team's most mysterious member, Cassandra Cain, are about to come to light, and that light will cast a shadow darker than anything they've ever seen before. They thought the League of Shadows was a rumor, a secret society of nihilistic killers often whispered about but never seen, but now the League is here in Gotham. They're destroying Batman's team one by one, and their sinister leader, Lady Shiva, has come to reclaim her daughter or destroy her. Can Batman's archenemy, Ra's al Ghul, and his League of Assassins stop the onslaught, or have the shadows come to stay? Woo!
That's a mouthful.
Yeah. What did you guys think of this one?
I really love this arc. This is my favorite arc of the run. As much as I love Lonely Place, but because the relationship of Shiva and Orphan, and just how Shiva takes over the League, and how it gets Ra's involved, and one of my favorite variants for the run is issue 952, and Batman's just in this dark cesspool and being pulled down. It's very horror-esque, and there's just a lot of good stuff. But the Cassandra Cain story with Shiva was one of my favorites of the entire run. If not, it probably is my most favorite part of the book run, and it was just fun. It was just a fun read, and just digging real deep into Orphan and her arc in this story.
I think this is a great companion 7 issues to Batman and Robin Eternal, which everything that Orphan was dealing with her father and going, is Shiva around for this? Is she part of it? So finally getting the payoff on this. She had 2 really crappy parents. So no wonder she is the way that she is, but you can tell that she is the way that she is because of both of these parents in a good thing. Like when you have somebody that's just grown up, that has the worst hand dealt to them, you admire the person that says, I'm going to make my life better so I don't end up like this. And there's that moment in the story where you're like, oh, Cassandra, don't, your father tried to tempt you once already to join him, and now Shiva's kind of doing that. You've already come so far, and Clayface is really trying to plead with her in this story that she's better than what your mother is trying to say that you are. Don't let her put those seeds of doubt on you. She's trying to twist your mind. And I think this is where the Clayface and Orphan relationships are wrong, where the strong friendship is really brought to the forefront in the story here, and their interactions with one another. And when it's finally resolved that Clayface and Orphan really become simpatico with each other out of this. So Living is my favorite story, and this is a very, very close second. I love these 7 issues, and the art is just stellar through these issues. Yeah.
My one of the cool things about this is because issue 950 launches this off. 950 obviously had the opportunity of being an oversized anniversary special, and so you get a story with Orphan that sets this up, and it gets to take its time a little bit. I think Peter talked about it a little bit earlier, how you get to kind of see where Orphan lives when she's not being part of the team. She lives at in the rafters
ballet
of a ballet, yeah. And there's a scene where somebody comes in to practice ballet, and then since Orphan is just curious about body language and movement and communication, dance is a way for her to kind of have an end to that.
And then that's mimicked so well in combat, and it's just
yes, exactly. And she's obviously a ninja. She's very stealthy, and that was a way of her to kind of bridge the gap between her brutal fighting styles and more of a human way of communicating, and to see her kind of mimic some of the dances and stuff, and then learn that from where she is living to then using that in the field later on, I thought was really interesting. And then later in the issue, you get this is kind of an issue that sets up a lot of things beyond this arc even as well. Then you start to get some interesting things with Azrael and Batwing as well. That kind of sets up future arcs too. So
she had a great fight with Shiva on top of a roof, and where they're just talking, and Cassandra stands her ground, and she just like, very, very kind of like Stephanie does most of the book, and she just proves herself, and she's like, I'm not going to let you just tell me what to do or think you could do it. I'm going to stand up for myself, and whenever Cassandra speaks in the book, it's powerful. It means something.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen often because she's so body language. It's like beautiful but brutal the way she fights. And just when she speaks, I've compared it to, it's almost like listening to Caesar from Planet of the Apes,
that's a great comparison.
And it catches your attention, and it's a statement. She's not speaking. It is a just statement with 3 exclamation points. She's making her point heard.
Yeah, and I love issue 954. Like you said, the covers are amazing, and the cover of 954 is so cool. It's Batman squaring off with Ra's al Ghul in the cave.
The variant's great too.
And then this is like it plants so many rebirth seeds of bringing back old stuff, but then yet it's telling the story of the League of Shadows, but it's also laying these seeds for the future, because you've got like this flashback of Ra's al Ghul where, Batman's has no shirt on. It's just his mask and his chest, which is kind of an allusion to the birth of
Neil
the demon
Adams.
And Neil Adams storylines. And then you've got, the general getting out of prison here, and Ulysses finding the Tim Drake suit, and Cassandra Cain at the end here. It's just, man, it's just so good. It's just so good.
There's so many breadcrumbs, like the Ulysses thing. Like you see that and you're like,
yeah.
And you just instantly know there's a connection there between the two of them. I mean, it pays off like several arcs down the road, but he planted that seed in our head so early, and it, again, like everything he's preluded to, it really pays off.
Yeah, this is a perfect example of an arc in this book being more than just a team thing. It's an event. It's a story that's happening that affects everybody. You've got Batman, you've got Ra's al Ghul, you got Lady Shiva, you have Orphan and her whole story, and how that all just kind of ties together, and you see that perspective and how it plays out with a lot of the characters.
Brings out the best of Clayface.
And I think and also in 956, this is the issue that was changed, the last page, where Bruce had just come out of the Button storyline, and I was trying frantically to find what the original dialogue was, but this is kind of saying that the last page is magic, Kate. That's what Raj used against me, and that's what we need to use against him. The original dialogue.
He was saying something else.
He was saying Tim Drake is alive, and that's where we were supposed to find out. So that was supposed to happen over in the Tom King Batman book with the Flash crossover, and that's why if you have the lenticular cover, if you look at the very bottom of it, the Flash issue shows Red Robin down the bottom corner. People are like, "Why is Red Robin in this?" I got a chance to talk to Jason.
I have to look at that.
I got a chance to talk to Jason Fabok at Motor City Comic Con last year, and I said, "Hey, I'm just kind of curious why Tim Drake's on here." And he said, "Well, I was given, this is who we want to have on the cover." He said, and Tim Drake was supposed to be in that issue, and at the last minute they decided to change and scrap that, so they had to go back to this issue because James was going to say for the first time that Tim Drake's alive, and this is where Bruce finds out about it. Then it was like, nope, we don't want to do that, so that's why he's on that cover, and why they had to go back to the press, because the original copies that were sent out for review purposes did have the original dialogue on it, and then DC said, "Don't talk about it, don't do anything. It's being changed, so don't bring that up in any of your reviews." So now that it's out and the cat's out of the bag, it's all said and done. You can talk about it, but
it's comic history,
right?
Now
Exactly.
But it's interesting that they were trying so hard with these twice a monthly books to even go there, to even try to be like, okay, so the Button Part 4 happens on this day, and my book comes out like the next week, so we're gonna have it like mentioned like right here, and be like really, really tricky like that. I think that's pretty commendable that they even try to do that.
Right.
So moving along, overall, League of Shadows is great. Like I said, Azrael kind of joins the team during this arc, and because we've Azrael and Batwing kind of take the two slots that kind of in the team that kind of go away when Spoiler and Tim Drake are not on the team. So it keeps the book kind of fresh and fleshed out and ever changing. So the next issue is kind of an interlude before the next arc, and issue 957, it's a one-issue story. It's called The Wrath of Spoiler, and the synopsis is that Stephanie Brown wants nothing more than to save Gotham City from the epidemic of costumed vigilantes and madmen that regularly tear the city apart. But before she can try to stop them, she must face the challenge of one in particular, the insane ideologue that the Wrath is back, and Stephanie knows what he has planned, but she refuses to let Batman risk more lives to stop him. That means it's all on her and a very unlikely ally. What did you guys think of this one?
I mean, this whole Rebirth Stephanie Brown was just such a huge highlight of Rebirth in general, and not just Rebirth Batman. So to give her like this just self-contained story, you know, like, and again, like another character from the 90s who's getting her due in the Tynion run, and it's great to see her just be a badass, you know?
Yeah, and I loved how she was true to her name, the spoiler, but yet that doesn't mean you have to blow everything up. So something as simple as just dropping some roaches into Harvey Bullock's donuts, you know, like that was so cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like these interlude issues like that because it gives them time to kind of take a break from these big giant arcs. You know, they just had League of Shadows, and of course, you know, we didn't get a whole lot of spoiler in that at all. So to have this one issue that focuses on what she's been up to and what her deal is now that she's not, you know, a strict part of the team, I thought was a cool breather.
And at the end it introduces sorry, Rob, but at the end it introduces anarchy, and even though it's one issue, it leads to other things.
Yeah, I loved that, and I also loved. I've always been a sucker for the Wrath, going clear back into the
Batman Special one from what 84.
I loved that issue. That was one of the first issues I got of Batman. Actually, it was like the digest issues that were really small. They like compiled like the blue ribbon issues of that year. So that was my first introduction to the Wrath. So anytime that he appears, I thought, oh, it's really cool. And Jason Fabok designed this costume for Batman Detective Comics 800 a while back. So I thought that was just really cool to see the Wrath in this. So that was a big takeaway for me. And then just like Peter said, Stephanie just being a badass in this was really cool. And like we've said before, James finds a way to organically just give each of the characters a spotlight, whether it's a whole story arc or whether it's a single issue. And if it's a single issue, you feel like you got your money's worth and more out of the book.
Cool. Well, let's move on to the next arc. I'm super excited about this one. This is a 5-issue arc from 958 to 962, Intelligence, and it is finally an Azrael-focused arc here. And so the synopsis is that when Batman formed a team of fellow vigilantes to help him combat evil in Gotham, he did it partially to protect his allies from the enemies targeting them, but being on the team makes for more targets, and sometimes the ghosts of your past can become everyone's problem. Azrael was raised to be the perfect assassin by the mysterious Order of Saint Dumas before he rebelled. But when the Order decides to create a more perfect assassin, Azrael and the entire team find themselves in the crosshairs of the deadly AI known as Ascalon. This kind of magic and mysticism was part of Bruce Wayne's training when he became Batman, and to save his friends, Bruce will seek the most powerful magical artifact that ever existed. The God Machine can give its bearer any knowledge, answer any question, but in the hands of the world's greatest detective, could it be even more dangerous than Ascalon? So, I thought this was a really cool arc. It crams in a lot of story, character stuff, and yes, DC Rebirth type of storytelling in a short amount of time. To have an arc, I mean, just on paper it sounds crazy, and an arc that has Azrael, Saint Dumas stuff, and Batman and Zatanna stuff, but Tynion makes it really shine, and you have these kind of two diverging paths that kind of come to a clash at the end, and it all makes sense and it all works. And I thought it was a really fascinating arc. And as you guys know, I mean, this comes up with a really clever way of bringing back the Asbat's armor in a really smart way as well. So for nostalgia factor alone, I was just super excited about this arc.
I love this arc. This arc was great. First of all, I'm a huge fan of Zatanna. So to see the Bruce and Zatanna flashbacks and just see the magic and the backwards letters, all tremendous stuff. This arc made me care about Azrael. I've never cared about Azrael. I've said this earlier. I just kind of thought he was like a funny talking guy, and I never really took him seriously. And this arc really elevated the character for me, and I really enjoyed reading just learning about his pain and everything and where he's from and how he's confused and just the system. It was all very interesting to me, and I thought it was a lot better than the original Azrael that we got way back when. And also just like again, like I said, I feel we had a couple issues in Fox Tech with that before the release of Asbats, and the Gordon Rabbit Batsuit, he was funny. So there were a lot of things that worked for me in this story, and I appreciate how it rejuvenated a character for me, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. What's cool about this is that just talking about the different parts of DC lore, this like finds a clever way. This is like Jeff Johns' level of picking obscure continuity and things in comics and transforming it into something new and making it make total sense. Like you had Jean-Paul Valley Azrael, and then you also had the Suit of Sorrows. You know, having this Order of Saint Dumas be this like technological thing really started to, with the Suit of Sorrows, really started to kind of be a thing heavily after Jean-Paul Valley was Azrael. This was in the Michael Lane era of Azrael that was out of Battle for the Cowl. That was when the whole Suit of Sorrows thing kind of started. And so they took Jean-Paul Valley Azrael, Suit of Sorrows as this like evil AI, technological AI, and then he had Batwing, Luke Fox, commandeer the rookie bunny suit Batman AI from the end of Scott Snyder's Batman arc, and found a way to like make that like the Batman AI, and he smushes them together, and that's what like saves Jean-Paul and creates this Saint Dumas Batman combo that,
and it looked great.
It was awesome, and it kind of echoes in a way, in a modernized way, of what Nightfall was doing when Nightfall was about Azrael being influenced by the system, being given the mantle of Batman, so he was at war with this conflict. But now with this new version of Azrael in Rebirth, it's kind of found an interesting way of taking that on as this computerized AI and giving that to Azrael to do good with it. And I thought that was a really just fantastic idea.
You know what's great about like especially this arc, but the whole series is, I love it so much for what it's, quote unquote rebirthing from the 90s stuff, but you could have never read any of the 90s stuff or the 2000s, and this could be your first Batman comic, and you could love it just as much. Like
totally agree.
You don't have to have been a fan of Nightfall and in the 90s, but if you are, it just adds so much. I mean, seeing that Asbat suit, I remember when those images were released and we were just going crazy. And then somewhere in 962, Escalon actually like does the Bane, breaking his back over the knee kind of move. And you're just like, whoa, it just blows you away. And one of the things I love in comics or in any form is when Batman goes undercover as Bruce Wayne. And this kind of starts out as him going undercover as Bruce Wayne to the Iceberg Lounge. And then there's some really cool stuff is like, it's in 961 of like a young Bruce Wayne with a young Zatanna. And I remember that was like, I think teased in the Batman animated series that they like had, he had gone to her father for training and that they had kind of a teenage romance kind of thing. And it was just, I mean, it's just so good. And seeing, I don't know if I say his name right, but is it Noms? Is it not the little furry guy who hangs out?
Nomaz.
Oh yes, I remember him. He was amazing.
That was a great pull to bring him back.
He was so cool. So he's
way cooler than any Porg.
Yeah.
And
we was going back to that, Zatara basically kind of like training Bruce. It was really cool how like Zatanna's kind of showing Bruce like, behind his back, like magic. And then Zatara catches them, and who's with Zatara? No, everybody else. It's Ra's al Ghul. So, it's just, there was those little things like that are really cool and they really pay off. And like, oh man, like Bruce, 15 years old, hanging out with Zatanna, and he doesn't even know who Ra's al Ghul is yet. So something like that was really cool.
And in a way better than the Gotham TV show ever could. Like, it was
That
so
show
good.
is,
Well,
yeah,
and-
that's bad.
As all of this is still going on in this issue, Bruce is wanting Zatanna to use her magic to tell me where Tim is. How can I get Tim? And her telling Bruce, there's things that we can do. You don't realize the ramifications that can happen. And she's struggling with, like, I can probably do this thing for you, but I shouldn't. You kind of need to let this go. And they kind of have that moment of like, Bruce still isn't over this, and he has an opportunity for her to change how he's feeling with the death of Tim, and to give some resolve, or to find out, can you bring him back in some way? So that was kind of touching too in this as well. And that, and the 2 covers of Azrael and the Asbats costume, the main cover and then the variant cover, are just friggin' awesome.
And Escalon wasn't like a bad villain either. Like, he's way better than
No, it's
Colony
true.
Prime. Like, I enjoyed this
Think
kind of like one-off. I'll probably never see this villain
Yeah.
again. Like, it wasn't bad. I wasn't like, I would cringe when I see Colony Prime. Like, Escalon was like, I was like, this is he had some cool fight scenes.
Yeah, as far as like robot AI characters go, being a villain, I thought that this was really interesting, really well done, and the way that they tied it into the system and Jean-Paul and how that whole thing works, it was kind of a really interesting look into that.
That's what really kind of was like, I was like, this is cool. This is updated. Like, I like this. I can get into this, you know, like that was part of the reason why I kind of like this version of Azrael so much.
Yeah, and the humor, there's some really good humor parts in here too. So like right at the end, you have some of the other characters reacting to this. I just love this interaction with Clayface and Orphan, where Ascalon gets the, what do they call it? It's like the God orb, the orb that knows all the answers
Oh yeah.
to human
Something
life
like
or
that.
whatever. Yeah, like Ascalon's holding this, asking questions, and then Clayface is like, "What's going on?" And then Cassandra says magic, and then Clayface is like, "Oh hell."
Yeah.
I love that. But the cool thing about this arc is that, you know, he's got it's reminiscent of, I guess, the end of the Justice League arc that was prior to DC Rebirth, where Batman was in the, what was that chair
The
called?
Morpheus,
Oh, what was he? He was on
Mobius,
chair?
Mobius.
oh
chair?
God, it's a new God thing. What's his name?
We're bad.
Metron?
Comic.
He's a Metron's
comic
chair.
fans.
Yeah, Metron's chair.
Metron's chair, and he knows the answer. He can ask it any question about the universe, and he'll get an answer back.
Does-
This is kind of like that.
Isn't there some? Didn't they leave us hanging on some stupid thing? Like, did Batman find out something and we never found out what it was out of that?
Yeah, it's that there's like 4 Jokers.
Oh yeah,
three
they still haven't explained it yet.
Or
Of
3.
course. Yeah,
Is it 3 or
Three.
4?
3. It was 3 Jokers.
3 Jokers. Yeah, we still don't know what that's about.
Never will.
But yeah.
But Batman does find
So,
out something very important in this issue, though.
Where I was going, is that, you know, Ascalon, they give this to Ascalon as a way, this orb as a way of getting rid of him, but it also kind of enlightens him to some degree. And before Ascalon departs or explodes or goes to wherever the next plane is or whatever he does, he has this nugget of information that he thinks is prudent to tell the team and Batman, is that Tim Drake is alive. And and that page where you just see Batman being told that Tim Drake is alive, and there's this look on Batman's face like, what? And he's screaming, no, come back. And then Ascalon's gone, and then Batman's just left with this knowledge. Was a pretty poignant moment, and to see, you know, Batman and Jean-Paul and the whole team kind of react to that was pretty powerful as an end to this arc.
Yeah, I mean, Tynion just, again, it comes down to just character with him, and he really builds up each character, and then when they, you know, I feel like they're nowhere near to even like close to overcoming Tim's death, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, guys, don't worry about it. He's not gone. He's still around, and it's just kind of like, it's like, wow, like the emotional up and down that these characters in this so far this arc have gone. It's just intense, and he does a really great job of it. He does a really good job writing like emotional dialogue and just bonding these characters together.
Yeah, this was the big moment that I think a lot of us Tim Drake fans were waiting for, and in another writer's hands, it would have been Batman that goes, "Ha! I found out because X, Y, or Z." Batman, the world's greatest detective, doesn't even didn't even realize that Tim was still alive in this moment. So that moment of him just having the no wait, come back moment was that was Batman unhinged. Like I need to know more, and it's gone. He's not getting any further answers, and now Batman's left with now what do I do?
And that's not disingenuous either. It humanizes Batman in a way that a lot of other stories just don't, or it's hard to because of the way that Batman is, So to see that in a comic book like this is it hits you more because it's something you don't see that often.
Yeah, and he plays it out later in A Lonely Place of Living, where Batman is just beating himself up and working himself, night and day trying to find Tim Drake for that very reason of I'm the world's greatest detective. I should have known this.
Yeah. So after Intelligence, the next arc is a 2-issue arc. That's Utopia and Dystopia. It's issues 963 to 964. And the synopsis is, having exiled herself from Batman's world, Spoiler has nearly destroyed herself trying to expose the corruption of Gotham City's vigilantes. Fortunately for her, help has arrived, but unfortunately for the city, it's in the form of the mysterious Anarchy. Is he truly on the side of the people, or is he a dangerous lunatic? And he has shown Spoiler the world he's built beneath Gotham City, which he plans to bring into the light, but she needs to know who helped him build it, and what's more, this alliance has put Stephanie back on Batman's radar, and now the two are on a collision course. What'd you guys think of this one?
This one was cool. It's just like anytime Stephanie seems to come around, she steals the show in this run. So just seeing her kind of get like more than just one issue is a real treat. Because we did have like the Wrath of Spoiler, but now she's a little bit more involved here, and it's interesting seeing that everyone else seems to think she's the old Stephanie, where they can kind of manipulate her and get her to do what they think she wants, but now she's kind of like, she knows what she wants, so she's actually using you for information, it goes back to just this rejuvenated character that Tynion has created.
Yeah, this story arc for me felt a lot like a Alan Grant story in a good way, with the underground city,
just because of anarchy
right? In it, the underground like community, the feel of it was very much an Alan Grant story, and I really like that. And then the cover of 964, if people have heard me on the Drake know, and I've said this many times, my all-time favorite thing ever written is Hamlet by Shakespeare, and that's the cover is an allude to Alas Poor Clayface, and I love it. And the last time I saw that in a cover was all the way back in Guy Gardner Warrior number 20, when Kilowog had died, and he's holding Kilowog's skull, and the cover says Alas Poor Kilowog. So it took me 25 years to get it again on a cover, but it's pretty awesome.
It's a beautiful cover. It's just great orange. It feels very fallish with like oranges and just kind of, it's Clayface is like leafing away, like in the wind, just kind of being blown away.
Yeah.
So it's a great cover.
And I really like the portrayal of Anarchy in this, where he's not the mad Unabomber he was kind of that way in the 90s, which, I thought that was cool for what he was there. But this is I don't know the best way to describe it. This is the life can be better than what we're given. We're not out here to try and destroy the world above. If you want to live up there and you want to have people tell you what to do and how we're eroding the soil and doing all this stuff, like look at the world that we're providing down here. And yeah, there's all ulterior motives in there that he has, but again, a testament to a good writer and the villain, where you find yourself going, I think he's kind of onto something here. And you can pull yourself out of it and you're like, no, wait, this is Anarchy. So this was a good 2-issue. I could have taken a 3rd issue with this, and we'll get to it in a minute. The trade for A Lonely Place of Living puts these 2 issues in the back of A Lonely Place. After Lonely Place.
Really?
So if you read this straight through, the last page is Bruce telling Stephanie that Tim's alive. So, she doesn't have any interaction with Tim in A Lonely Place. So if you read this trade, that's when Stephanie finds out Tim's alive, even though that happens technically before. So,
yeah, and it's not a bad way to read it too, because a lot of things in this 2 issues don't get picked back up until after A Lonely Place of Living happens, like with Clayface in particular.
I really did dug the Mole Man vibe I got from Anarchy. I thought it was cool, you know. It's just these two issues were just fun. It's just cool. I mean, Tynion is just so good at just writing these characters. It makes you really care about them, and just seeing Stephanie and just really just kind of just again just use the information for her abilities instead of trying to have somebody else tell her what to do. It's just refreshing to see.
Yeah, so I enjoyed both of those two issues, and although it could have been longer, I do like the 2-issue Utopia Dystopia. I mean, they were very too the way it's set up is interesting, because in the first issue you have this nice rosy picture of, oh, we're doing something for good, and then in the second one you kind of see what's really going on, and at the end it does set up that Anarchy is working with the Victim Syndicate, which comes back up later. So, but to table that for a little bit, the very next arc I would say would have to be the highlight arc of this entire run of Detective Comics. It's issues 965 to 968. It's A Lonely Place of Living, and this is the triumphant return of Tim Drake. He left us in the first arc of Detective Comics, and then he returns in this one. So the synopsis for this is that for months, Batman has been haunted by the death of Tim Drake, the young hero who fought beside him as Red Robin. Tim helped Batman assemble a team of heroes and misfits to help him keep Gotham safe, then fell in battle defending the city, or so it seemed. In reality, Tim has been held captive, snatched from the moment of death by the mysterious Dr. Oz. Now he must escape this prison that exists outside of time, but he isn't coming back alone. Tim has every reason to trust his fellow prisoner, but when his new ally proves he's not afraid to kill, Tim begins to doubt everything he thought he knew. When the duo make their way back to Gotham, Tim's escape partner sets a plan in motion to murder one of Batman's allies. Even reunited with Red Robin, can Batman and his team of heroes protect one of their own from a killer who knows them better than they know themselves? What do you guys think of this one?
It's just another hit, you know. Like, it's funny. Like, I feel we just keep repeating ourselves, but I mean, it's awesome because it's a love letter to Tim Drake, you know, and it incorporates A Lonely Place of Dying, and there's part of the Jeff Johns futurist. What's the name of that one? The Teen Titans.
Titans of Tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, and that, so then it's just you're getting Bart Allen involved in this at some point, and it is a grand scheme of DC Comics, like lore and history, and it just plays off so well, you know, and it's great. I mean, everything's great from the artwork with I believe this is Eddie Barrows who drew most of these issues. The covers are great. I mean, and it effortlessly ties into what they were doing with Superman, so it was a cool little tie-in with Dr. Oz, if you weren't reading that. And the variant for 965, it pays homage to Superman the movie, you know, with if you're thinking like Zod in the beginning of that when they're saying guilty. Superman, so there's a lot of really cool stuff for DC fans in these couple issues, and it's just a joy. I mean, to see just Tim Drake back, you know, when you know he's not dead, but then again you're like, when is he coming back? And it's great to see him back and have his own story and his own arc in this run, just get his due again, like Tynion does with all these characters, and he gives them their moment to shine.
I mean, I guess it's okay.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's not worthy to make audio drama.
To make an audio drama. I mean, this.
How many? Before you give your comments, Rob, how many hours of your life have you given to this 4-issue series in terms of radio drama time?
If I counted it, I'm up almost over 200 hours.
Wow.
Wow. That's like playing through Dark Souls.
Yeah, exactly. So I know this arc like the back of my hand. And my only complaint, and I'm using this word very, very lovingly, that this, if you buy this trade, this does not read well on its own, because it just starts with, you know, the origin retelling of Tim Drake, but then Tim is in these, you know, rings. So if this was your first book, it's like, how the heck did he get here? So for the radio drama, I tied in the very first arc. So you could buy the first arc and this one together and get the full story and not need the middle. But it's obviously one giant story. So I mean, this was huge. Obviously, like I said, made the radio drama out of it. But there's just it's a love letter to Tim. It's a love letter to Batman and how important Tim Drake is to the Batman mythos and how important Batman is to Robin, and what the things that it meant in living, those same things are now turned upside down on their head. That, dying was supposed to be Bruce was losing himself in the wake of Jason's death. And this is Tim is going to end up losing himself in himself, thinking he's got to try and help preserve Batman. Batman's trying to be one step ahead of everything else, and so Tim's trying to be 2 steps ahead. And if he continues to go down the road that he's going to wind up a twisted, evil version of himself that he, in one point he's like, I'll never become Batman. Well, you'll become Batman when there's no one else that can be Batman, and you're going to do something horrific if you don't change the way that you're going. So just a fantastic run. Mm-hmm. So if you want to hear more about that, go listen to Everyone Loves a Drake.
Yeah, that's a great place to plug that. These 4 episodes of Everyone Loves a Drake is a giant audio drama and discussion portion of this entire arc, which we're not going to be able to give it its entire due here in this episode, but there is a lot more discussion of it there. But for me, it's kind of incredible. Like you said, Rob, it's not the best arc to just kind of jump into, but I feel like it kind of earned it at this point. If you were on board for Detective Comics, by the time you get to this arc, it takes everything that led up to it, and it also sets up everything that happens for the rest of the series. It's almost like the big crescendo point that kind of dovetails into the entire end of this entire arc. And it's not just a lot of, oh, this thing happens set up. It kind of like tells you what's going to happen before it happens in a very interesting way. I don't know if that's a good way to explain that, but it's action packed and everything, and it solves the mystery of Tim Drake coming back, but it does it in a way that keeps the focus on the characters, which is really fascinated me, and that's probably the biggest emotional connection between this story and A Lonely Place of Dying, is because that story was introduced Tim Drake. It explains why Batman needs a Robin, and then it explains why Tim Drake is such an important character. And this arc reaffirms that. And the fact that it's able to do that, but at the same time be part of this crazy story in this arc and run of Detective Comics is pretty incredible.
Yeah, this is where I realized that James was playing a much longer game, having lines of like, well, Stephanie says at one point, well, after what Tim become after Clayface, or actually Anarchy says that. And it was, reading that the very first time, it was a complete throwaway line. And then when we get to what ends up happening to Clayface and who did whatever happened to Clayface, you go back to this and go, oh, holy crap. So this is, like you said, where the crescendo is. And this is where James starts lining all the strings together and going, all right, I'm tying things that started this series, and now I'm starting new threads that are going to go right through. So this is where I really started appreciating his writing in hindsight, when I was doing the radio drama, being 4 or 5 issues ahead of this point and going, holy crap, he was telegraphing things in this series to us, to events that's currently going on right now. Unbelievable.
And I get this feeling there may be some beats still to tell as the events of Doomsday Clock and what DC has in store for the whole universe and Dr. Oz and where's Dr. Manhattan and all that stuff. I feel like this story may have a little bit more to play out in that whole realm, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Also, like the Connor Kent teases were great. I mean, like, I wasn't expecting him to do that stuff either. And when he goes, I believe the exact quote, isn't it, "Who the hell is Connor?" And he says that, and you're like, whoa, dude, and you're just like, I didn't expect you to do that at all. So when you create just this amazing story about a character you love so much and you're just enjoying it, and then they throw that at you and you're just like, oh man, like what am I in store for?
Yeah.
And that it just speaks to how great the story is, because he hits on all notes.
Yeah. And then you just pull in the whole, like, oh, it's DC Rebirth. It's not just a evil version of Tim Drake just to do it. This is something that already has a legacy and history in past DC Comics, and it explores what could happen if Tim Drake does become Batman in the way that he becomes Batman in the story. And the more And what it really impressed me is that this arc becomes it's good by itself, but it becomes that much more stronger after you finish the rest of the run. Because you, like you said, Rob, you go in and you see what happens to Clayface. You see what happens to the other characters that you could logically believe, oh man, Tim Drake is, if this keeps going like this, Tim Drake really will end up to be like the bad version of Batman version of himself. And just going back to this arc itself, it was really interesting to see it give you a plausible path for how Tim Drake would become Batman. Like, well, Bruce Wayne dies, and then this happens to Dick Grayson, and this happens to Damian, and this happens to Jason Todd, and I'm the only one left. And it just made a lot of sense to me, and it just ties up all these little pieces and parts of lore and history, but it doesn't get in its way. It just lets it tell a good story.
Now, a question. In Titans Tomorrow, was that Drake, was he as unhinged as what we see in this story, or is that Tynion just taking what John's created and adding his own twist? Do we remember that? Anyone?
He was more brutal than what he is in this, and we talked about it on the episode that's going to come out soon, that it's like a Back to Future scenario, that this version of Tim Drake remembers an older version of himself talking to him, but that version of the Titans of Tomorrow Batman was just straight up, if you chase somebody down, it kind of reminds you of the Thomas Wayne Batman.
I thought of the Damian Wayne Batman from
it's
Grant Morrison issue, I believe.
Yeah, it's kind of like that too. He ends up taking out one of the Joker's, I think it's kind of like a Harley Quinn character. Drake Batman's been chasing this person for a while, and then just actually kills her in Wayne Manor, and like ends up shooting a hole through her head right into the Wayne family portrait. And Connor's like, you've got to quit doing these type of things. And Tim says, I killed the weed, didn't I? Isn't that the whole point of our mission?
Okay. I didn't know he was that unhinged already.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
I wasn't sure if it was Tynion just being creative.
No. And I think Terence has said this a couple of times. He can correct me if I'm wrong, that this was where Tynion really cut his teeth on the Tim Drake character, and it really influenced his version of Tim Drake along with the Chuck Dixon run. So once I saw this version of Tim Drake there, I thought, oh wow, Tynion really has a grasp on this, and I'm sure he consulted Jeff Johns about this as well.
Yeah, it's a very interesting foil to give Tim Drake, because we're so used to Tim, like we said at the start of this, Tim Drake being, the heir to the greatest detective. He's going to follow in Batman's footsteps in terms of being the smartest one. And we see how far down the wrong path that can be taken when he does acknowledge that. The future Tim, Batman, acknowledges that. He says, I'm not the strongest, but I'm the smartest, and I figured all this stuff out, and I know how to take everybody down and that kind of stuff. But it's very interesting to have Tim Drake, because, when you think about it, the way Tim Drake has always been as a character, I guess his own worst enemy really could be himself if he lets it. And to see that personified in this version of Batman and to see that version of him unleashed on the rest of the team and see that play out was very interesting. And the way this arc ends, again, it doesn't tie up in a nice bow. It's not like the end. Tim Drake's back. It's like Tim Drake is back, and there's more questions than answers, and everything isn't so resolved. So, what did you think of the way that this ended, Rob? When you first read it, and then later on? When
I first read it, I'll be honest, I was disappointed. I was like, "What? We're going to leave our hero standing in the broken, shattered in this belfry that he's built for Batman. He's staring out the window going, well, now what?" And that's where I was like, at a reader, I was flipping through the pages. I'm like, isn't there another, is this Stephanie going to come in and kiss him on the mouth and say, you're back? We're in the lonely place of dying. Tim has, I'll try not to let you down, Bruce. And he's going to become the new Robin. It's like, great, Batman's got a Robin. In this, it was more of like, well, great. Now Tim's future's on hold. So going back through with the drama and spending time with it, I was really like, this is the beat it needs to end on. Yes, Tim is back, but he's been gone for a while. His world is literally turned upside down on himself. So I think it's a beautiful way to end the story. And we talked about it in our discussion, that this whole series is it's about the windows. The windows of the bell tower. They're always looking out to the future, and the windows are now cracked in this bell tower, and the future of Tim is literally cracked like a mirror. You know, it's all over the place. So I didn't like it at first, but rereading, and I'm like, this was a perfect way to end this arc, and it opens up a broader window, if you will, into what the future can lie for Tim.
Yeah. And when you just think about like the whole, at least to Tim, the whole purpose of making the Belfry and this team was so Batman could be eternal. So even if he stops being Red Robin and long after there's a Batman, there's still going to be something in place that's going to take care of Gotham. So it's just so for him to come back and to see how everything he built utterly failed and did not work, puts him on a collision course for the rest of the series. That kind of makes him confront all of that in a very interesting way. So to that end, the very next arc after this is Fall of the Batman. It's issues 969 to 973, 5 parts. And the synopsis is, everyone in Batman's orbit is broken somehow, some more than others. For Clayface, keeping the pieces of his psyche together has been a years-long struggle, and it's a war he may be about to lose. And as the team tries to pull itself back together, their enemies have learned something from Batman's newfound spirit of cooperation and have conformed a cabal of their own. What'd you guys think of this one?
This was fun. Like again, like it's more first victim stuff. So he's kind of first victim, and what was the Mudface, you know, and we learn more about that and just how the victim syndicate is going to use Clayface to utterly to basically just tear apart the Bat family, and you know, it was just great. It's just great writing, you know, just typical Tynion, just taking characters that, you know, again, just have these small parts, but then he creates this just love and affection for them. And then when they fail and they falter, you really feel for them. And again, like we had some crazy variant covers, like Batman hanging upside down in blood from Arkham Asylum. You had Batman in a silent scope, like sniper scope with Batwoman. I mean, they were just like, again, just great artwork. They went with great storytelling, and that's basically the continuation of the run. You know, that's what the run's basically all about.
And think of like the storytelling and the echoes of what happens. You know, right after we lost Tim Drake in the first arc, we have the Victim Syndicate, and then right after Tim comes back in his arc, they return to a team that's just as broken as they were the last time, but maybe they don't even know how on the edge they are. You know, right? Because now they think they're rebuilding and they think everything's in a good spot, but then everything really starts to fall apart, and all of the things that, you know, the future Batman Tim predicted would happen or warned Tim Drake would happen start to happen in this arc. And I think that's a really like poignant way to frame this story. Like in the final issue of this arc in 973, I love the way that opens. You know, it flashes back to, you can almost read this first scene as the very first part of the very first issue. It happens before the team's made, and it talks about like, it's just a cool scene between Red Robin and Batman about he's creating the Belfry, and he comes up with the name of the Belfry and explains you know, why are we bringing Clayface onto the team, and it kind of reiterates a lot of the themes of what this book is about. And it's really interesting. It was once I got to this part in the run, I thought that, oh, this really enhances the very, very first part of this book, because it speaks a lot to the overall themes of it. And then just the way that scene dovetails into Tim. Like, it's almost like Tim is remembering that in his head, because then he gets knocked out, and then it comes back to present day in that last issue, and then just to see the way that it ends. I mean, the main part of this arc is that Clayface is finally just getting very unstable. He was unstable already, and they were trying to find him a cure, but then the Victim Syndicate gets a hold of him and basically tortures him until he loses it. And and a major decision has to be made about what to do with him.
One of my favorite parts was I think it was 971 or 72 when Batman just finishes like clearing out the end of Arkham Asylum, and now he's fighting Clayface, and the back and forth of Batman just kind of like, I believe in you, you can do this, pull through, Basil, pulls through, and then he uses the freeze gun on him, and then he's like, oh, he tricked me, you know, like it's just, that part was really cool. That was one of my favorite parts of this arc.
Yeah, I got a Arkham City vibe out of that, where you're fighting Clayface and you're using the freeze bombs to do that scene. That was really cool. And then you mentioned the variant cover. The variant cover, after reading the issue for a 973, it's all in red and black, and the words "Blam" is over top with Batman, Red Robin, and Spoiler just having this shocked look on your face, and then Cassandra getting involved into the fight and trying to speak to Clayface. That if anybody's going to get through to Clayface, it's gonna be her. And just the way that plays out was just, if I didn't shed a tear up till now, this was the issue that did it for me.
Yeah, because this is like the climax of the emotional journey of this team. Like if you look at the team as a whole, you know, this tested it right here, and to see it telegraphed in A Lonely Place of Living, and to see it actually come to fruition here, it is heartbreaking. Not just because Clayface is gone, but because of what that does to Orphan, and what that, you know, and what that does to
it affects them all.
Batwoman. Yeah, it affects everybody in different
and
ways.
This goes back to A Lonely Place of Living. This is what Tim Drake Batman was trying to say. I need to kill Batwoman because of what she's going to do in the future, and that Red Robin's future is literally going to crumble right at his feet. This is the moment that the Bat Drake was trying to prevent, and it happened. So going back to that issue, it's like, oh, holy crap! You know, we as much as he kept saying that issue, it's going to happen sooner than you think, and for the readers, it did.
It's so great just going back and just picking up on all the breadcrumbs that you might have missed, or that he was just laying out, and now, because you know what happens now, and you go back and you're like, he's so good at this, just kind of teasing you, and he's letting you know something's coming up. You don't even notice it, and he's just such a great writer. I mean, he did a little bit of Batman and Robin Eternal, correct? Like he was part of that.
Yeah, he was the main writer. He handled all of.
So that's probably where but now that was probably where I was first exposed. I remember I said earlier, I don't really remember Twitch, but now it's coming back to me, and it's like now to just see him and his creativity and what he can do, like all by himself, and he doesn't have to rely on like somebody like Snyder and work with them, but he can create this large ensemble, and you just care about these guys, and it's great. He's so good. He's so good at this stuff.
I mean, it's something that. Like we've talked about Chuck Dixon too, like this is, and to see Tynion do this, it is using the you're using the long form storytelling potential of comic books to your absolute advantage with this, because all the arcs are good stories in and of themselves, but then they reward repeat readings, and they feed off of each other. And they're all good individually, but they're definitely parts of a whole. And playing this long game in these comics really does kind of maintain a connection with these characters and seeing them in new lights.
That, I think, the bi-monthly keeps it fresh. You know, you're getting it twice a month, so therefore, like, you know, I'm going back and like reviewing Deathstroke, and I have to kind of reread the previous issue. And it's like with this, it's like this was only 2 weeks ago. I remember this. You know, it's still very fresh.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and the way that these arcs are set up too, I can't stress that enough, because it is twice weekly and the arcs are like 4 and 5 issues. That's not 5 months. That's like, you know, half of that, because it comes out twice a month. And
I can't imagine how he crammed all this in, like writing this.
I know
it's pretty intense thinking about it.
Yeah.
I would love to see his whiteboard. It keeps
it fresh. I know it'd have to be like a TV show. Like, okay, I plant this seed here, and then it comes apart there, and blah blah blah. Oh, and I got to do this other crazy like Dark Knight's Metal in between this and stuff like that. He's has to have been crazy busy trying to get all this stuff done. But it holds up as a big collected story. Like it's really kind of excellent. So when this arc ends. It ends on a giant splash page, and then as a reader, you know, okay, well, this is what future Tim Batman warned about, and we know, you know, everything's going to change after this. And we know that gun basically kills Clayface. I mean, they tell you straight up, like, this is like the only thing that can, and it like breaks him down on a molecular level and stuff like that. And so you kind of know
there was nothing hidden about that. That was straightforward.
There was nothing hidden about it. Plus you know from the hints that, oh, this is gonna stick, or they make you think it's gonna stick, at least, because you see, well, if that happens, well, that's what causes the future Batman to happen, right? So.
And then 981, you're like, no, what?
Yeah. So, but very smartly, right after you see Clayface being killed, there is a really, really fantastic Detective Comics annual that comes into play right before the next arc happens, and this is where you would put it if you're doing a massive like binge read, because that it comes out the week after or something. It comes right after 973 is this Detective Comics Annual 1, and it's one issue. It's an oversized Detective Comics Annual. It's the story is called Clay, and it is basically here's the synopsis. It is the shocking, heartbreaking origin of Clayface, including his first conflict with Batman. Actor Basil Karlo was on the cusp of fame and fortune, the kind he had dreamed of through his painful childhood, until an accident robbed him of the good looks that took him to the top. But scars don't make you a monster, only the darkness in your heart can do that, and in the wake of the accident, Karlo's darkness is revealed. I love this issue so much. It is one of the absolute highlights of this run to me. Totally. I wish we had a monthly series or something that was just Tynion writing stories like this. Because it's heartfelt, it's emotional, it hits a lot of character beats that are great, and this in particular, because you have just experienced all of this build up for this version of Clayface, you've become so invested in him, and to see him ripped away from you, and he's dead now, right? And then the next week you get this big issue of his origin, and and that makes it makes it that much worse and more heartbreaking. But you see. You see how he was created and why he is the way he is, and it ties back into the Victim Syndicate stuff with Mudface and everything. So, what'd you guys think of this one?
This was great, like, because it ties back to the original Basil Karlo Clayface origin. So there's like flashbacks to that, and again, like you said, it ties into Mudface and the Victim Syndicate and how Clayface now feels guilty for this, and how he realizes what he's been doing, and now that's part of why he's on Batman's team, not only for a cure, but try to do some good, try to prove that he's not as bad as everyone thinks he is. And it's just a refreshing, just rejuvenation of a character that you probably wouldn't give two cents of, and when you heard about Clayface in the beginning, you probably brushed it off, but Clayface turned out to be one of the big emotional characters in this whole run, and this is like the pinnacle of it.
I was very hesitant when this came out because I was having like traumatic flashbacks to Batman Annual #1 in the New 52 when Scott Snyder rebooted
Mr. Freeze
origin. And I'm like, oh no, what are we going to do?
The most infamous comics in recent memory I can think of.
It's like, oh no.
Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. What are we going to do with Clayface? And in fact, I agree wholeheartedly with you, Ryan. This was fantastic. I even loved in the flashbacks the use of like old fashioned film to be borders or to actually be the panels of the comic page. And you really, I mean, he made Clayface, a very sympathetic character, but yet still making him the bad guy in that he makes bad choices. But yet it isn't so like, oh, woe is me, feel bad for me, heavy-handed with it. It felt really natural. And I complained earlier that I thought Clayface wasn't, as much a Batman villain as a Superman villain. This made him feel way more of a Batman villain to me than anything I'd ever seen. And just a fantastic annual.
Yeah, it's just a strong, like, annuals used to be the throwaway thing, like, oh, we got this annual and it's Pirate Batman, or it's an Elseworld thing or something like that. So that was one thing I did like in the New 52, that they treated that 5th week annuals as, okay, we're still telling the story, or we're going to give you a different point of view of the current thing that we're talking about. And I'm glad that carried through through Rebirth, and just what a... Man, I sound like a broken record after you guys have said everything. It just, what a great issue this was. Like, I was already a Clayface fan going into this and seeing like this just underlining, red line marker under why James picked Clayface to be a part of this team. And by this point, you got to love the character, you got to fall in love with the character, and you understand like the heartbreaking scream that Cassandra has after Clayface has died, and then to see the tragedy that befalls Clayface as Basil, to why he has to go through this Clay to try and get him to do so he can try and continue his acting. Is just brilliant. I'm getting all tongue-tied just how great this issue was. Just what a fantastic issue. Again, like you said, Ryan, a highlight of the series, a definite highlight.
And had it?
Yeah, it's like it's.
I was just to say, had it been explored before that his father had been in the movie business and had been like a makeup man and making monsters and stuff, or was this new for this annual? Because I don't remember it, but I thought that was a great beat of the story.
I think the dad stuff's all new.
Mm-hmm.
He's always had like acting background, but I don't think his father was ever in the picture.
Yeah, I feel like this is new, but what really I loved about this, and again, it's something that DC Rebirth is all about, is taking this old stuff and appreciating the legacy and history of it, is that the Basil Karlo historically is the first Clayface. We've talked about how there's been 52 different Clayfaces over the years, and Basil Karlo it has been the first one, but way back in the 40s or whatever. But Clayface, that first Basil Karlo Clayface was never historically had never been the big giant monster putty guy. The original Clayface was an actor, and he was basically like a serial killer. And they kind of took that and made it something new in this. So they kind of combine the origins. So the film in this issue that Basil Karlo is trying to be a part of, the way that they describe the story of that film is the origin story of the original comic book 40s Basil Karlo Clayface, is that it's an actor that was in this movie, and then they remake it years later, and that he's not involved, and then he gets pissed, and then he goes and dresses up as that character and starts killing all the cast and crew. So that was kind of a really interesting way to kind of tie back in the original history and story of the original Basil Karlo Clayface into this one. Yeah,
This is more like the Matt Hagen animated series Clayface, but I love the Basil Karlo version of this Rebirth. If I don't want to see any other version of Clayface other than this one, because this one is just fleshed out so well. And again, that's what Rebirth has done, taking something from the past and weaving it into something new that feels very fresh and still very familiar at the same time.
Yeah, I love Clayface. I've loved Clayface since I was a kid. So to see this is great. I mean, I grew up with BTAS, so like Matt Hagen was the Clayface that I first knew about. And I mean, on top of that, it was voiced by Ron Perlman, so that was just amazing in itself. But I really got into the Basil Karlo iteration of the character recently. I recently bought like a trade that had Clayface stories from, just issues past. And I was able to reread that original origin. And then this literally came out like a month later, and you compare and contrast and how it's just faithful. And that's great.
Yeah. So like I said, I can't say enough good things about this annual, especially where it's placed in the run right after you lose Clayface. So speaking of that, the next two issues are kind of like standalone, kind of interlude kind of issues, which are really a really important setup for the very end of this run. So issue 974 is Night's Fall, and the synopsis for that is, can Tim Drake piece his dreams back together after Batwoman's fateful decision, or will the Gotham Knights go their separate ways? And issue 975 is the trial of Batwoman. And it's actually, since it's 975, I think they were able to make it a anniversary story, and it's actually 30 pages. It's longer. And in that one, Batwoman faces scrutiny from Batman and Red Robin, but stands up for her actions. Will Batman allow her to continue bearing his symbol after everything she has done? What do you guys think about these?
I thought these were solid 2 issues. The thing about the interludes in this run by Tynion is that they're very integral to the rest of the story. You know, either they dig really deep into the character, or it takes like a little nugget from a story and expands upon it. And this is just another thing, you know, building up to building to like, well, what happens to Batwoman? What are we going to do with her? She's got, you know, like she killed, we don't kill, you know, that whole thing. And it was just fun. It was a fun 2 issues.
The thing that I really liked is that bringing in the primary Bat family into this for the discussion brings in Red Hood, Damian, Nightwing, Batgirl.
Yeah. Batgirl.
Like, the core family member, even though this is Batman's like special ops team, the family is going to help decide this with, and in some cases for Bruce, and where Batgirl is standing on it. And the thing I really liked about the last issue is just kind of where Jason is. He's got his arms crossed and is like, hey, I get it. You know, as speaking as somebody that has done what Batwoman has done, like he's addressing the elephant in the room. Is like, well, you know, Clayface was unhinged. She did what she had to do. I understand we don't have this rule, but I kind of don't play by these rules, kind of like she is, and I'm okay with it. And Bruce isn't okay with where Jason is in that. And each of the Robins has a different stance on what has happened, and I think even Batgirl's stance is really pretty cool. So I
which is probably the most impactful out of all of them, to be honest. Like, she goes off on this
that
big
comes
speech.
back up later.
Yeah, her speech is fantastic in this,
and she really puts everyone in their place.
Yeah, and that makes me, in just this, the only time she appears in this book, that made me go, man, I wish he was writing Batgirl, or I wish she was part of this team. I wanted more out of that. I wanted the interlude to be 90 pages just to get more of his Batgirl. So yeah, the interlude, like Peter said, it's integral to what happens whenever the interludes are. It's to future stories and pulls plot threads that James has written before. So I love both these issues.
You know, Batgirl, Red Hood, and Damian Wayne Robin, you know, aren't in this run very much, but when they do, you know, James writes them really well, and I love Damian's little. All he has to say is, "Hey, I don't think any of you belong here. It should just be me and my dad," and that's all he has to say.
That was perfect.
He is great sometimes.
And but I really found myself reading these not knowing like which side to agree with, almost like when I listened to, like, you know, Batman vs Superman, BVS, you know, thinking like, is it okay for Batman to have done that, or was that too far? And I go back and forth sometimes with that, and same thing here. I was like, was it okay for Batman? Like, what else was she gonna do? Like, she had to save the city, but is there always another way, or is there sometimes this is the only way? And you really towards the end feel like Kate Kane has no choice but to leave and go back and join, you know, her father in the colony and all that. And so that way, when that turn does happen, it feels really natural. And God, man, your heart just breaks for Cassandra Cain, the orphan, in these 2 issues, and just what she must be going through, and the tortured hell that's been her life. And she finally gets a friend, and this is what happens. It's just, it's just so good. And
you get that emotion from her without really speaking much.
Yeah.
You know, you really feel that, and she says nothing.
And that she...
Well, that's the thing.
I'm sorry.
Like, this, in this, I know we're all excited about this issue. Like, in 970... Because that's the thing, this 974 speaks to all these, you know, latent things about Batman and seeing his influence on other characters that I think is just absolutely beautiful. And it speaks to the heart of not just Batman, but this book and this concept of what he's trying to do with these characters. And to see, you know, it's like, first of all, Batwoman, if you go all the way back to her first appearances and her original origin and this and that, she is wearing the bat symbol for a very specific purpose, and she's wearing it. Cassandra is not wearing the bat, and I don't think she's been offered to be wearing the bat symbol, right? And she is part of this family, and she's been, you know, shepherded into it and being part of this team, trying to find her place. And then you add on Clayface on top of that, and then to have this leader, Batwoman, you know, do the thing that as a symbol of Batman that Batman's not ever supposed to do. And it's the thing that Cassandra has been fighting against this whole time. It goes back to her arc in the League of Shadows arc about how she doesn't want to be a killer. She's holding back to not kill people, and she believes in Batman as a better way. And to see that ripped away from her, like on so many levels, narratively, is absolutely heart-wrenching. And to see her rip the bat symbol off of Batwoman's chest and then lose it. And you know, she, like we said, she doesn't speak much, but she loses it and says, "This symbol is special. It means don't kill. It means never kill." Like it's a gut punch when that happens, because that just speaks to the heart of those characters and what Batman means. And it's beautiful, but it's definitely heartbreaking at the same time.
And she was the one that deserved to be able to rip that off of Batwoman.
Yeah.
That was a point. I'm glad you mentioned that. That was just a poignant scene of like, this is important. It's special. You weren't even given the symbol. You wore this on your own. I've been working with this family, and you, sorry for the analogy, you just pissed all over it by doing what you did. So I thought that was just, again, like it was a huge gut punch in this issue.
And then the following issue, 975, it's a really awesome concept to take. It basically takes the other members of the Bat family that haven't been part of this book and has them analyze what's been happening, you know, from an outsider's perspective. And I just found that really intriguing, because they're almost like the cipher for the audience. Like, well, what would you do? What would you do? And to finally have Batgirl be the final point on all that, of like, you know, Batman is having all these other people do a trial because Batman doesn't even know what he would do. You know, because that's the thing. It's like, well, if Batman knew what he was going to do, he would just do it because that's what Batman does. But he doesn't know what to do here. So he has all these members of his surrogate family to try to figure out what to do. And this is the thing too, and Batgirl brings it up, Batman is doing this because Batwoman is one of the closest blood ties he has to his family. And that's not something that had really been explored a whole lot before this book, and this book touches on that a lot. So to have that brought up, I thought was really interesting. Okay, so 975 puts things in the spot for the final issue, or not the final arc of this entire run of Detective Comics. It's issues 976 to 981, Batman Eternal, and the synopsis is: with his team completely shattered, Batman must confront Red Robin about the future of their partnership, if there even is one. This is it, the unbelievable conclusion of James Tynion IV's Batman epic. It's the last stand of the Gotham Knights, fighting a monster they helped inspire and a destiny that they won't accept. What will become of the greatest crime-fighting team that Gotham City ever saw? So this is the end of this arc and Tynion's run on Detective Comics. What do you guys think about it?
I thought this was cool. I like when parts of this run make me think of like comics past. You know, even if it's not, you know, it's just, it almost makes me feel like Tynion was reading this with me at one point, and now he's kind of like put his own twist on it. You know, like I feel like Ulysses at one point was kind of like our point of view into the story. You know, we saw a lot through his eyes, and then it just kind of turns its way, and he's kind of like this uber, like Lex Luthorian bad guy, and, you know, he eventually loses altogether, and he's kind of like Maxwell Lord inspired because he's got this thing with the Omax, and it's just really cool how he can just bring up older characters, and it's in a really fresh way. And I like this, you know, I just like, I like what I had before, but like, this is cool now. Like, I like this interpretation. I like your version, your take. It's new, and it's cool because you're involving Red Robin and Batman. And it's just, I really enjoy what he does. I just do.
This is easily my favorite Brother Eye story, because I was never a huge fan of the concept of Brother Eye, and that Batman somehow had time to build this artificial intelligence that runs amok and all that. And so that Brother Eye was future tech was a little bit more believable because it's not of our time. And it wasn't heavy-handed with the EYE for I and the dialogue and things like that. Mm-hmm. So it was actually very believable and very well done. and not, I mean, I'm trying to think of which one of the final Crisis, or one of the Crisis ones where like the entire sky, I remember, was covered in, Brother Eye, whatever you call them, replicants or whatever they are, and there were billions of them, and this was much more compact and story, and I liked how it didn't feel like your classic like wrap up of a story necessarily, where they throw everything in the kitchen sink and every character who's been in it and everybody and everything. This was really kind of contained to the group and was really focused on like Batman's relationship with Tim Drake and Batwoman and Spoiler. And it was just a really like, I don't want to say low key, because it was like the fate of Gotham hung in the balance, but yet it felt like a very small, intimate story, even if it wasn't. And I think a lot of writers might have said, "Oh, I'm going for the big one. I'm going to blow up the Death Star," or I'm going for all out on my final arc here. And he kept it more about the characters than the actual, let's blow up the Death Star or whatever. And that was really enjoyable to read.
Again, I'm a repeat city here. Characterization, I think this last arc, and this is my second favorite arc out of it, out of the whole series, that this just ties everything together. It's been about characters. We said at the very beginning that he still has a voice for each one of these characters, and Tim sounds like Tim, and Batwoman is written just as she should be, and the way Brother Eye is distorting how Tim sees things. So the future Tim Drake Batman, Brother Eye was affecting his mind in that. So when he becomes this OMAC version of Batman, the pain that Tim felt, it was using it as an emotional blocker, that he didn't want to see the thing that we're led to believe, that Batwoman, she's not only killed Clayface, but she's killed Bruce Wayne at the same time, and we get the nice little throwback of the oval Batman suit.
Oh yes, that was great.
In this and here, a gray-haired Batman, and
the future stuff that was excellent.
Yeah, all that stuff, and that it's the sadder thing is because Bruce had been working on this satellite, that he's dying, and if the government is coming for him, they're gonna assume that Kate is going to do her thing and she's going to take out Batman. So let's just make it look like that's what's supposed to happen. And Tim did not want to own that and see that. And it's Stephanie that gets through to Tim. So all of the relationship things that James has been playing with this whole entire series come to a head in this arc, and especially in the last issue, that Stephanie can get through to Tim, and that relationship that those two people have, and that all the relationships that Bruce has with all the members is just, again, it's just beautiful.
My favorite thing from the final arc here has to be when Ulysses tries to use alternate timelines in like a Minority Report, like, video wall type way against Stephanie and Cassandra, and it completely backfires, and it totally it is the two of them at the top of the mountain screaming that they've made it, and that they are not what you've read before. They're totally new interpretations of these characters. They're strong, they're independent, they're bold, and it's such a great thing to see on just this gigantic splash page. It was beautiful artwork, storytelling, everything. It was panel placement. It was perfect. It really was.
Talk about a absolutely pitch perfect way to play the long game with a story and run on a comic book like this and have it end in something like that, because you have these two characters we talked about at the very beginning that in previous incarnations were both Batgirl, and here in this they aren't. It's Spoiler and Orphan, and to see them actually confronted with that, with what we the readers know, and to see what they do with that information is just absolute brilliance. And then the fact that they took that and it didn't break them, it actually made them stronger, is just incredible. And to see, somebody like, we're talking about Cassandra and what she did to Batwoman earlier about ripping the bat off of Batwoman's chest, and to see her notice that, oh, I was Batgirl, the symbol, they let me wear it. but that actually makes her stronger because then in the final issue of this arc, in
they know they're
981,
worthy.
I know that moment where Cassandra says, "I just saw another world. I'm not doomed to be bad. I'm a bat. This is where I should be." And she's fighting alongside Batman, and Batman has a smile on his face.
Yeah.
That's how you do smiling Batman Justice League.
Yes.
Freaking that's when it's okay.
Yeah. Yes.
It's okay when you spent 48 issues of a comic book building to it, and it makes sense, and it's freaking badass, and it's a reflection of, everything's going to be okay. I know what I'm here to do. Orphan knows her place in it. This is where I should be, and it could not be more beautiful.
Every character gets their payoff in this run. That's why it's so special.
Yep,
Every character gets paid off.
That's what I'm saying. That one part in this one story is the payoff for one character, and then you get that for all the other ones.
He really is magnificent at ensemble writing. He does it fluidly. No one ever seems crowded. It's well spread out. He builds up things. He throws clues at you. You don't know that are there. I'm gonna miss him. I really am. I usually don't like a big bat team, but he did it really well. He did it effortlessly.
Yeah. So does anybody have any other thoughts about how this whole arc wraps up? 981. We were just talking before the show. Like, how many times have you read 981?
No, so I've read it 5 times, and while we were talking, I kind of half read it again. And the big thing is, for those of you if you've gone this far and you haven't read the issue today, go read it. But Clayface is still alive. That he shows up as you get the send-offs for each of the characters, and Clayface has the moment with the doctor where he says, "I think I'm ready now, Victoria. Let's get the hell out of here before I change my mind."
With her too. That's what made it so even better.
Yeah.
October was with him, so they're still working together. He's still trying to figure it out, and it was another payoff.
Yeah, and that's a payoff that he had, and that makes me go, so wait, was Batwoman in on the thing that, hey, you need to kill me so everybody thinks that I'm dead, or it's a happy accident that I'm dead, that I can maybe get rid of this Clay once and for all? It was so good. And then Tim Drake going off and Bruce kind of letting me go out on his own, and he and Steph have that moment of like, hey, I've kind of seen the future. I don't want to be alone. Let's do this together. And
it was great. Alfred turned off the tracker.
Yeah, that Bruce says, no, we don't need to do that anymore. They're fine. It's just...
And the two of them are together, which is what she wants.
Yeah.
And he really wants too. He just can't let go of running around off rooftops. But the fact that they get their moment together, it's kind of like watching The End of Rises and Bruce and Selena, and it's it's that type of payoff. They drive off to wherever. I don't know where they're going, the cabin in the woods.
Yeah.
But they just
it's literally they're driving off. Yeah. They're literally driving off into the sunset.
Yeah.
But
he's like, I'm driving to college, and he's like, you're not doing that. Wherever you go, just do it. You know?
And to know that. This makes me go, okay, Tim realized back in Lonely that there was this name Connor that was tugging at his heart. I'm thinking in the future, I'm like, he's not giving up the superhero gig. Are we going to see a Young Justice come out of this? Is there going to be a series that's going to come out in 4 or 5 months of Red Robin and the Outsiders that it's got, Connor.
Sign me up for a Red Robin Tynion series.
Yeah. So, and there was a tweet, I don't know if people were paying attention to, a couple months ago. He said there's 2 nights that he's planning on spinning a story out of this arc. Oh. So what 2 nights are together at the end of this arc? I went, holy crap, it's Stephanie and Red Robin. Those are the 2 nights that are together, because I don't think he's going to do Cassandra and Barbara, which I thought that was really cool that Cassandra is with Barbara. We could talk about this for another hour, but this is such a...
I'd love for Cassandra to pop up in Batgirl.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's how I wanted to kind of end this, is just now that this arc is over, where are all these characters now, and did you like how they ended up, and are you excited about the possibilities of where they could go in the future? Because some of this stuff isn't written yet. We don't know where some of these characters are going to show up next. other than Batman, of course.
Yeah, I believe the next series coming after this is I think it's like a 3 or 5 issue Black Lightning series, Black Lightning and Batman. But I feel like all the other characters are just kind of, I think they're just giving a breather right now until I guess somebody comes up with a creative idea. Really, I mean, I feel like Tynion still doesn't have any time. He's writing Justice League. He's doing other stuff. I just feel like someone's got to come up with an idea with a pitch. But I think they have something great to work off of. I mean, I think he really left all these characters in a new, refreshing, redefined, positive light. And I mean, we would all buy solo series of these guys.
Oh,
you don't really have to twist my arm if you want to give me a Spoiler and Robin series or a Cassandra getting tutored by Barbara in Batgirl. Like, I mean, I already read Batgirl, so it doesn't matter. So just put it in there and make it special, But I don't know where they pop up next, but when they do, I mean, I'm looking forward to it, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, we had the unresolved arc between in terms of Azrael. You had Ra's al Ghul confronting Azrael's father, and we didn't really see the end of that. So I kind of would like to see where that is going to go, and they allude to that at the end of 981, but we know that Azrael is going to start to be part of the Justice League in space, the Justice League Odyssey. So that's we'll have to follow Azrael there. The only character that kind of gets the short end of the stick in this book is poor Batwing. You don't really even get a panel of him of what he's doing. You just hear Kate Kane saying, "Yeah, he's going to put down Batwing for a while because he's going to focus on getting rid of Brother Eye." But
it reminded me, and it was funny because I was on this like YouTube rabbit hole where I just watching YouTube video after YouTube video, or the day before I read this issue. And I saw this YouTube video about like, what does the ending of the movie Castaway, the one with Tom Hanks, like what does the ending of it mean, where he's just standing at those crossroads and he's like looking at which way to go, and the movie just ends. And it had a spoiler. It actually told you what was inside the package. Apparently in one of the drafts of the movie, he opened the package, and I could, if you want to know what was in the package, you can watch that YouTube video. But this reminded me of how this ends. It's just like all the characters are just like standing in the crossroads. They could go north, south, east, or west.
That's great. Yeah,
we don't know. And I think it's open where if no one picks these characters up for a while, we can in our minds just play out the movie in our head of what Tim and Stephanie are doing, and what everybody's getting into trouble and having fun and doing all that stuff. And if somebody else comes up with a great idea, well, they're right there to start a story. I mean, I would love to see a Tim Drake, Stephanie Brown mini series with them in no costume, just kind of like driving around, a road picture, kind of driving around America and stopping, and
like that Bizarro Jimmy Olsen series from like 2 summers back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's the beauty of this series. It's just kind of it could be anything. I think
one of the testaments to a good storyteller is taking the characters from the beginning, and by the time you get to the end, the characters are better and stronger than they were when we first got them, and they were already better and stronger than they were when we first started reading this book in the first issue. That it's a rare thing in comics it's sad when a creator leaves, but sometimes when a creator leaves, it's the end of the story, and tomorrow's a new day. I really felt totally 100% complete when this is done, that I can read this front to back, and it's a single great story, epic journey, that I'm not left going, well, the TV show just got canceled. It left us on a huge cliffhanger, and things never got resolved. If this was the last Detective Comics story ever told, I feel completely satisfied. This isn't something that's going to go on the shelf and I'm never going to read again. I'm going to continue to reread this. This is going to go in.
I'll buy this in a collected edition.
Yeah, I've already been buying the.
I hope we've talked about this.
Like an absolute edition, this would be fabulous.
I hope this. Yeah,
some of those Clayface panels would be amazing in an absolute edition.
And even in just the first volume that I bought that collects the first couple arcs together, just the backup designs that are in here, and all the variant covers and the sketches that Eddie Barrows and Alvaro Martinez and just all the different creators, and
Carmen Canero.
Yeah, and that's something that we've been talking about, James, in this the whole time, that the artwork is absolutely beautiful. Sometimes when you're changing artists from arc to arc, it could be kind of jarring. I never really felt that anything was kind of like, the art's really bringing the story down. sometimes you can have
it enhanced it. I mean, the emotion on their faces and the close-ups were real. Like it was powerful stuff. The writing and the artwork really complemented each other so well throughout the entire run.
And producing a book every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
too. And
I mean, that's what I was about to say,
Okay,
Terrence.
yeah.
That's exactly what I was about to say, is the fact that this book also came out every 2 weeks.
And none of these guys work on one book.
No.
You know?
Yeah, and that it was as consistent as it was, and it didn't miss a beat, and the story just kept going.
No delays. It was great.
No, I mean, DC was known for being the delayed company that, back
still
in the
waiting for
80s.
All-Star Batman and Robin.
Oh, yeah, just like...
Me too, me too.
It'll come out. It will.
Yeah, dates were getting dropped left and right, and when it went to twice a month, I remember reading stuff on Twitter like, is DC going to be able to do this? Like, okay, some book is going to falter.
Doomsday Clock, too. That's always late.
Yeah.
Well, now that's bi-month,
Yeah.
every other month, yeah.
But that James was able to churn this out, and then he was writing Batman and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and then
which is awesome in itself.
Yeah, his creator
Both
owned
volumes.
stuff, and this, and
the metal tie-ins.
Yeah, so
the Batman Who Laughs might be the best one of
Immortal
all of those.
Men.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love that book.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing he wrote really slacked off. It was all amazing stuff.
Yeah.
He really just, for like the past 2 years, really incredible stuff. Didn't miss a beat on top of his game.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is it's sad that it's over, but when you think about it, we've got darn near 50 issues of this nice self-contained.
It's 2 years of books.
Well,
not even.
It's like 4 years of books if it was a monthly book. I mean,
and it doesn't get its due. The book's not nearly as praised as it should be. And a lot of people get turned off by team-up books, but it's really good. I mean, what he did with Clayface and Stephanie and Cassandra just makes up for everything they screwed up with New 52. It really does pick up.
A great way
it really picks up a lot of the slack, and this whole run is really fabulous. If you can get it in back issues, I mean, if you can get it in trades, it's really something you should read. If you like Tom King's Batman, this is different, but it's not bad. It's really good, and it's kind of flown under the radar, I feel like.
Yeah. This is the part of the podcast where we wrap up and just sing its praises for 20 more minutes, but this, when Peter just said this makes up for the crap the New 52 had, he's not wrong. I mean, this arc does it. When I look back and we have 50 issues of this is a 50 issue love letter to the world of Batman and these characters that a lot of us have loved and been invested in for so many years, and it brings them back in a fresh way, but it also celebrates them and puts them through some pretty heavy trials, and they come out stronger for it. It's the perfect kind of Batman arc, really.
And my final thought is tying it to our podcast, Everyone Loves the Drake, is taken from a Seinfeld quote. It's that Costanza moment. You leave them on a high note. Thank you, good night. As much as I'm out. But Jerry Seinfeld said, let's leave the show on a high note. This wasn't a series that people went, it started trailing off towards the end. I dropped it over. He left us wanting more, whether it was by his own accord or DC said, hey, you're doing so well here. We need you over here. So I'm glad I was left with the feeling of wanting more rather than going, I never read the last 6 issues. It was a snoozer. So I'm glad that it ended where it did. Of course, I wanted him to go to 1,000, but like I said before, completely satisfied.
Yeah,
he might have stories he still has to tell. He just doesn't have to do it in Detective.
I'm sure.
The Connor Kent stuff he teased.
I mean,
he can tell a story on that.
He said he still had an Azrael arc in him where he wanted to have Jean-Paul Azrael versus Michael Lane Azrael. I was like, no, I want that.
That's a 6-issue miniseries in itself.
Yeah,
he's got clout now. He can say, "I can do this. Give me an Azrael series," and they'll let him do it.
If that's where he was going to take that with Ra's al Ghul and his father and Saint Dumas and Michael Lane Azrael, I'm like, please give me that now. Yank him out of space and make him do this.
And we've been talking for over 3 hours and no one's mentioned the purple cape, because I don't care
I know
anymore. Some people were having such a big deal. And when I read it, I don't even think about that. Yeah, you're so into the characterization. You don't even care that there's a purple accent on the cape or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's Batman. Yeah.
As long as he's not wearing a Clooney Freeze suit, I'm fine.
Well, and I'm just glad that I had Justin voice my Batman. So, Justin, you wore the purple cape, buddy. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Justin is the purple cape.
So do we have any other final thoughts about this just most excellent of Detective Comics, and just such a nice like vision from beginning to end. You know, you talk about, you know, like Grant Morrison's Batman run was so great, but man, it was like a bajillion issues. It went like 5 or 6 years. It went through like multiple different titles and spawned new titles, and had to go through like New 52 and then some to get done.
It was confusing as hell.
I think
it went through Final Crisis and out of Final Crisis and Return of Bruce Wayne crossovers and to be done, and this to me is like just as good as that, but it's like in a nice
it's in a nice bow. He did in 2 years what it took Grant Morrison to do 6.
Yeah. I don't know if Grant Morrison could have done it with these deadlines though. Twice,
No.
I mean, bi-monthly.
I don't think so.
I mean, I don't know. I'm just thankful. You know, I mean, this run rejuvenated a lot of characters that needed it. You know, visually, emotionally, you know, just by design. It was what we needed for a lot of what is in Gotham City. Not necessarily Batman, but for everybody else.
To me, this is the person in the crowd going to see their favorite band. That's like, play track 9. You know, where it's like, all the other books are worried about playing the hits. This is James going, I love track 9. I'll show you why track 9 is really good on this disc that was never released as a single. That's what this book was for me. This is the deep cuts where you go, man, people need to check this out.
And it was a great counterbalance to what else was going on in Batman at the time, because you had the Tom King run going on simultaneously with it, and that was a whole different feel and pretty much a solo Batman kind of thing, except now Catwoman and all that. But then you also had over in All-Star Batman that Scott Snyder ultra-violent, where Batman's gonna get shot 15 times and stabbed in the head 3 times and lose 8 gallons of blood and and so this was it just worked well, with what else was out there, where you could get those things too, but then still have the team and the supporting cast and some really great characterization. So it's been a fun 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's a testament to the strength of the story. I mean, we all love Batman, but how many Batman things could pull us together to talk about it for over 3 hours straight?
Yeah,
you know, I mean, we all knew it was gonna be long, but man, I don't think we're tired of talking about this arc. I would hope that, years from now we'll still go back and say, man, that Tynion run on Detective is still like a benchmark.
Yeah, no, I think this is going to go down as like one of the better runs. Like, I think people are going to eat this up when it comes out collected, because then you could just, I mean, granted it's bi-monthly, so you can just kind of read it, straight through. But like, having it in a collected edition just makes it a little bit easier. And it'll probably be in the right order. That Clayface annual will be where it's supposed to be, as opposed to how it was released.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but like, I think this is going to go down. I know everyone right now, it's like Tom King's and White Knight are pretty much at the top, and that's all anyone talks about. But I really do think this Detective run deserves to be up there, without a doubt.
I agree totally, Peter.
Final thoughts. It's amazing. Like I said at the beginning of this thing, if you have read it, I hope you enjoyed hearing us, gush about it for over 3 hours. If you have not read it, I hope you got a crash course on what this incredible run was and what it's about, and hopefully it has inspired you to pick it up. I guess we'll move on to plugs. I'll let Peter plug first.
Follow me on Twitter at Pete Illustrated, or follow me on Instagram at Peter_Illustrated, and post a lot of pictures, a lot of fun stuff. Just be cool to interact.
Cool. Terence?
Yeah, you can find me with Rob and Ryan over on Everybody Loves the Drake, and you guys on Batman on Film have been great to put us on your podcasting network and been very supportive of us. So we really, really appreciate that. And we just have fun just talking comics.
And then again, like Terrence said, Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake. If everything lines up right, you can get this podcast on the same day that you get Everyone Loves the Drake's podcast, which I'm kind of telling you, listen to that one first. The final episode of our radio drama, episode 74, will come out, the conclusion of Lonely Place of Living. And then Terrence and I have a sister podcast, Batman and Robin Eternal, that we're on Twitter. And then Facebook as well. So you can kind of find us on iTunes. Now that sister podcast is officially on iTunes, so you can find us there. So thanks for letting the Drake take over, BOF.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, when we're talking about comics, there, you three guys are right up there. I mean, we couldn't ask for better people to talk about comics, and like we said, covering this stuff on Batman on Film is really fun, and covering the films is great, but it's always fun to highlight things like the comics, and this detective run absolutely deserved the accolades, and I wanted to do the due diligence from the BOF side of really putting something out there that really kind of puts a statement and shows like, yes, this run was incredible. It's worthy. Like, please go out and support it. So to wrap things up, follow me on Twitter at SMB_Ryan. Follow the Batman Podcast Network at BatPod Network. And of course, the Robin Everyone Loves the Drake podcast at ELTD Podcast. So that wraps up today's marathon episode for Rob and Terrence and Peter. I'm Ryan. And as always, Batman on Film, authoritative, definitive, the dadgum original. We'll catch you next time.
Hey now! You've been listening to the Batman on Film podcast, a proud member and the sponsor of the Batman Podcast Network, batmanpodcastnetwork.com. You can listen to the BOF podcast on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, TuneIn, and wherever good podcasts like this one can be found. Want to advertise on the BOF podcast? Go to advertisecast.com/the Batman on Film Con podcast. Follow Jet on Twitter at Batman on Film and on BOF's Facebook fan page at facebook.com/jet.batmanonfilm. Email Jet via jet@batman-on-film.com. I'm announcer Rachel. Thanks for listening.